Hello, hello. This is your boy Shrimp, and I'm back with this continuation of this fan art. It was just a day, last night when we did the last stream, and so I'm very just really fresh out of the the last session. But yeah, I'm kind of determined to finish this artwork for today. Sorry for the wait. Also, kind of did some few things before starting the stream. And yeah, right now we're gonna continue this. Looking forward to continuing the design for the dress, no, uniform, not a dress. I'm gonna add some few purples down on the this part so that it won't just be just pure cold. Let's add some hot stuff on this. Okay. Yeah, definitely going to try to finish all the clothes for today. And if we can, later after doing so, maybe edit some few stuff or start with the background. Yeah, it just needs to polish this background. Just the general idea is already done, but yeah, I'm thinking of like adjusting some of the trees later on. But yeah. Alright. So we'll continue also with the story for the Dead Page who doesn't want the fourth time. Last time we've left, it's the side story, chapter 10, with with Gorty and the two decisions. This is gonna be interesting because Lord Courtney is in the pickle right now due to what's happening to Vandally and his gang, and yeah, well, his plans might go to ruin due to all of this. But let's see. Let's see. Okay. Right now, we'll continue with this. Stop over here. Forgot to check out some references. Here I go again. Just really quick, guys. I'm just gonna go check some references that I've saved in my archive. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Um, yeah. Let me just check it. Alright, we got this, and okay. Yeah. If you remember the tried checking this out. And if you can see this kind of effects on the clothing, I want to try something like this if I can. I know it's kind of hard to follow. Yeah. Uh, Sorry, I forgot the name of the artist for this one, but I'll definitely check it out next time. I wait. I think I see his watermark. It's too blurry though. Can't read it. Uh, well, better luck next time maybe. Anyways, yeah, this is good. This is good. References, other stuff that we can use. Oh no, that's a thumbnail. Sorry about that. Wait, let me just continue searching some of the stuff I want to apply on this design. Let's go to the background folder maybe. Is there anything that I might able to use here? It's for you guys to, if you want to see it. Here it is. This is some of my collection. Things that I gathered. Don't know if I can find something that I might be able to use. This one's interesting. The coloring. Yeah. Has the same elements I'm trying to apply. Bit of warm color, but still has the dominion of the blue or the cold color on this. Yeah, just the subtle impact to make the silhouette looks this really nice. Let me just chuck it in the other another screen. Let's see if I can still find something else. Wait, am I okay? I am. Let's just check. Oh, nah, that's too sci-fi. About this one. I don't know. Ooh, this might work a bit. Just for reference. As you can see, there's like a lot of random stuff I put here, but mostly in this selected folder I'm using right now, it's mostly the background that I like, that I find in the internet, and just save it here. This is the recent one I just saved. Found it on Facebook. Really nice. I wish I've seen this I got this before when I started the fan art for Gura and Monster Hunter. That fan art I did with Gura and her and as a Monster Hunter. If I had this, maybe it could have helped me. Uh, Guided me to create something. It's just really simple yet so beautiful. Look at the background at the back. This is amazing. Yeah, I'll just put it on the other side. I might get some inspiration from that while doing this, doing the background for this one. Yeah, there's also some real stuff, well, that I've collected, and some transitions from this one to this beautiful and awesome detailed picture over here. Oh my goodness. Just look at the comparison. Dang it. So jealous with this kind of talent, man. How do they do this? This is amazing. They're probably using some. They're rendering some photos from the internet and just pasting it, and then blending it with the background. Yeah, because some of this are. Yeah, this is definitely a photo. This one also definitely a photo. It's not a. Uh, Digital work. Yeah, you see, that's a real person. This is a photo that was been combined together. The only paintings are probably this guy's, the silhouettes, and just the blending that he did. This one's actually, I think it's a bit of a both painting and a realistic photo that was combined. Yeah, and also the whale maybe. Not sure if it could be a painting. Yeah, it could be a painting. Yeah, but not. Let's see other stuff. Maybe. Oh, this is really sick. Yeah. Dang! Look at that. It's really vibrant, but it works. It really works. Like the blue is too vibrant. It pops out everything, but at the same time, so cool. Really, really cool. While the red is very prominent because it's the warm color on this side, and the character over here. So it's a focus shot, not the 3x3 4. What's it called again? Uh, anyway. Anyways, let's just check if there's other things that I might be able to use here. I did that. Oh man, sometimes the Windows refresh like this. I hate it when that happens. I guess that's just all of it that I might need to use here. Yeah, let's continue with the design while we're at it. Um, let's see. I'm thinking of using some other brushes also for the background. Want to explore some stuff. Think of some new ways to improve my style. Okay. Alright, okay. Where are we? So yeah, for the story, let's continue. Okay, I'm gonna click the excuse me. I'm gonna click the that Mage who doesn't want a 4 time now. Continue the story for and me continuing this fan art right now. Okay, talk to you guys later again, and hope you enjoy my live right now.
Side Story Chapter 10, Rod Corti and the Two's Decision. It seemed that Vandali had undergone a job change to guide her. The job that was a requirement of being a champion, the job that Bellwood and Zakat had acquired. It was difficult to believe, but it was true. But the situation that he had caused as a result of acquiring the job was even more difficult to believe. To think that he would guide people to Veda's circle of transmigration system exactly as they are. Rod Corti could not suppress his shuddering as he struggled to deal with the errors that were occurring in unison. Veda's races such as vampires and ghouls had been converting people to members of their own races using rituals. These rituals involved giving their own blood to these new members or submerging them for days in mud mixed with their own blood. They differed depending on the race. But these methods all took a great deal of time and effort. And the charm of changing race usually did not overcome the people's fear of such a change. Alder and the other gods had taught them to fear it. Vampires could acquire near-infinite lifespans, but they would become unable to walk beneath the sun ever again. And most would be opposed to having to slurp the blood of others in order to survive. And other races such as ghouls, Scylla, Lamias and Arachne had remarkably different appearances from ordinary people, so it was natural for people to fear and avoid such changes. Alder had focused on making sure that the anecdotes of saints, epic poems about heroes and myths about himself would spread and make the people hesitant about becoming members of Veda's races. These were more exaggerated than similar stories on Earth. Vampires would be rejected by maidens that they desired as their brides and fall to ruin, crying words of grief such as, "So you would choose the sun over me as well?" The fact that some still chose to become members of Veda's races of their own will was a headache-inducing problem, but that was a mild pain compared to what was happening right now. Vandali had undergone a job change to the demon guider job and started to unconsciously guide the people to Veda's circle of transmigration system. The human and dwarf citizens of Taylorsheim had already been transferred to Veda's transmigration system without their races ever changing. The reason that Vandali was guiding his citizens to Veda's circle of transmigration system was likely because he had been taken into Veda's system himself. This was a dreadful situation for Rod Corti, just like the pseudo-reincarnations that Vandali had been conducting. As their races have not changed, the people have no clue whatsoever as to what has happened to them. Only us gods know the secrets of the circles of transmigration, and, of course, we cannot reveal those secrets. The citizens of Taylorsheim had no way of knowing that the circle of transmigration system that they belonged to had changed. Even Vandali, who had guided them to the new system, was unaware. For people, no visible ritual had been conducted, and no changes to their bodies or minds occurred despite being moved to another system, so they didn't know what had happened. And even if this became known to Alder and the gods who served him, it was unlikely that they would know what needed to be prohibited. He would be left with no choice but extreme options such as declaring Vandali as an enemy of the gods and ordering the people to exterminate him. This would make no difference to the current situation. As I thought, there is no choice but to erase Vandali. Since he had become a guider, Vandali would continue to guide others unconsciously. Not every person would respond to his guidance, but the high standards of living in Taylorsheim would be incredibly attractive to them. In the end, as always, the only option that Rod Corti had was to erase Vandali. "No, aren't there other options like trying to reconcile with him?" asked a voice. "More importantly, there's something I don't understand. Why did we die?" asked another. Two reincarnated individuals were looking at Rod Corti through half-closed eyes. An earnest-looking woman, Shimada Izumi. A man with a somewhat vacant-looking face, Machido Aran. The two of them had suddenly died and found themselves here. Aran had not even been aware that he had died. They had been watching Rod Corti for a while as he groaned to himself for reasons that they didn't really understand. The two of them didn't know the specific details of the circle of transmigration systems, but they could understand that the god before them had come to a conclusion through some very extreme thought processes. "Shimada-san, do you know what happened?" asked Aran. "Hey you, what did you do with your calculation, your only redeeming feature? Or should I call it Laplace's demon?" said Izumi. Aran's cheat-like ability was calculation, which had also been known by its code name, Laplace's demon, in origin. This ability gave him computational power on the level of a supercomputer, or perhaps even greater. As long as he had enough information, he could even predict the future to a certain extent. "Don't be so unreasonable," Aran protested. "What are you trying to ask me to calculate when I've got no information to work with?" If he didn't have enough information, super advanced calculations such as predicting the future was impossible. Also, these calculations were only calculations, nothing more. They were vulnerable to errors due to unexpected and unknown situations. I suppose that the only thing I know is that I wasn't killed by you, Shimada-san? He said tentatively. You're right about that, said Izumi. You were killed in an explosion. A string of hand grenades came flying from the wall, and that was it. I was further away so I didn't die instantly, but it seems that I lost consciousness before I could cast any spells and died soon afterwards. Ah, what's known as near instantaneous death? Yes, near instantaneous death. Then the ones who did it are Murakami's group? If grenades came through the wall, I'd have thought it was Kanata. But he's already dead, said Aran. What about the intelligence agencies of each nation? Izumi suggested. My ability is convenient, but it was hated by many, so I think it's possible. Now that I think about it, Hiroto's ideals are a problem as well. They're working as an NGO that doesn't belong to any specific organization or government, said Aran. We acted like superheroes, so it's true that a lot of people liked us, but a lot of people hated us as well. Especially my Laplace's demon and your inspection, Shimada-san. Shimada Izumi's cheat-like ability was inspection, which allowed her to see through all kinds of falsehoods. It wasn't merely seeing through lies, she could see through every kind of disguise, forgery, CG footage and illusion. She had often complained that this ability had made the magic shows that she had enjoyed on Earth very dull, however. It had been Aran's Laplace's demon and Izumi's inspection that had allowed the capture of the metamorph, Shinmari. But although the two of them possessed powerful abilities, they had little in the way of strength in combat. They both had considerable talent in magic, and they did receive training to some extent. However, they hadn't fought as combatants on the front lines like Kanata and Mari. That was why the two of them were never sent to dangerous places, being left to process information behind the scenes for the bravers, but it seemed that they had been targeted for this. But considering the method and timing, there isn't anyone among Murakami's group who has a similar ability to Kanata, is there? Said Aran. Probably not, said Izumi. But maybe it's possible to achieve something similar by combining multiple abilities. Well, now that we've died, there's nothing that can be done even if we figure it out. Ah, if things were going to turn out like this, I should have eaten more fried chicken, pizza and terra burgers. You're right, I would have liked to get married at least once. Impossible. I can see through the lies of men, even if I don't want to. The two of them were calm despite having just died, but this was the second time that they had died, and they had lived for 46 years in total between their lives on Earth and in Origin. And since it had happened so suddenly, they hadn't had time to feel anger or regret. And they were in the company of not the ones who had killed them, but each other, friends who had died together, so they weren't too upset. Ah, it has restarted, Rod Corty thought as he looked up at Izumi and Ran. So, about your next lives, he explained to them that they would reincarnate in Lambda, and that he wanted them to kill Vandali, just like he had done with Kanata. Unlike Kanata, the two of them listened calmly. Even as they learned that the undead that the Bravers had faced in Origin was Amamiya Hiroto and now Vandali, they didn't lose their composure. Absolutely not, Aran said flatly. In fact, I'd rather die than doing something that reckless, said Izumi. As I thought, said Rod Corty. Unlike the time with Kanata, he had been expecting them to refuse. Unlike Kanata, as well as Tanaka and the others who had died after him, these two were not suited for fighting at all. It wasn't as if they didn't have any qualities for fighting whatsoever, but they had chosen a path in Origin other than training those powers and skills. But feeling guilty of the sin of essentially having abandoned Vandal in Origin and considering the fact that he was originally a student attending the same school, Aran and Izumi were hesitant to simply refuse this request. They could see that if they remained quiet, the other reincarnated individuals and Vandali would kill each other. Looking at what this person is doing, it's hard to even say what Amamiya-san would do, said Izumi. Even considering that we couldn't save him, if you apply the common sense and ethics of Earth and Origin, what this person is doing is crime and terrorism, said Aran. Of course, that's only if you apply the common sense and ethics of Earth and Origin. Especially the creation of undead, it's an act that tramples on the sanctity of the dead before it's a crime of property damage. Even from the viewpoints of Izumi and Aran, this was what Vandali was doing in Lambda. But never mind it being a different nation, this was an entirely different world. Considering that this was likely just how things had turned out when he had used death attribute magic, and considering that he had no affinity for any other attribute, they couldn't condemn him unconditionally. In fact, considering the way that Vandali had been treated in Origin, they even felt respect for his strength of will. At the very least, they themselves would have found it impossible to put the philosophy of, the good you do to others is good that you do to yourself, into practice. In fact, while Vandali had killed over 100 people in the Hartner Duchy, he had saved over 1,000. However, they couldn't be certain that the other reincarnated individuals would think the way that Izumi and Aran did. Amamiya and his followers likely wouldn't try to erase him right away, but, now that we understand the situation, I'll ask one more time. Can't you reconcile and persuade him peacefully? He was originally a Japanese person, and given the information that you've given us, I think negotiating will be possible, said Izumi. At the very least, it seemed that Vandali would listen to what had to be said. Though it also seemed likely that he would simply listen and walk away without saying anything afterwards. Izumi and Aran hadn't been present when Vandali's second life came to an end, but from his point of view, that was likely incredibly close to being a similar offense. Shimada-san, how would you persuade him peacefully? Aran asked. Well, convince him, though it doesn't seem like he would listen. How about things like offering him favorable conditions? Izumi suggested. Can you think of any conditions that we and this god could offer him that would be favorable for him? I can't think of anything. This was something that they had never thought about during the time that they had lived in Origin. Forgiving small crimes, plea bargaining with the appropriate judicial branch, guaranteeing safety, reduction of prison sentences, release on parole. These were the primary methods that the Bravers had used to bargain with criminals, but none of these had any meaning to Vandali, who had been reincarnated in Origin. By offering a reconciliation, it might be possible to prevent a battle to the death between Vandali and the other reincarnated individuals. But it was unlikely that he would be able to stop creating undead. The scales would be too unbalanced away from his favor. Also, neither Izumi nor Aran had any connections or organizations now. Once they reincarnated in Lambda, they would just be individuals with special abilities. Even if they were born into the royal family of a great nation or the family of merchant with an enormous fortune, it would still take nearly 2 decades for them to rise to positions where they would have any political influence to speak of. It was difficult to imagine that anything they could offer would be of any significance to Vandali. The only thing that I can think of is information about the other reincarnated individuals, but giving that to him would be protecting ourselves rather than reconciling, said Aran. You're right. Then, what else? Normally it would be money, a social position, honor, or women. Is there anything else? Though its population was small, Vandali was already the ruler of his own nation. His citizens gave him their absolute support, and he was served by countless members of the opposite sex. Was there anything that could be offered that would convince him peacefully and allow a reconciliation between him and Rod Corti? It's impossible, Izumi concluded. You're right, Aran agreed. Even if we told him that we would serve him with our powers, it seems like he would just tell us, it's troublesome, so I don't need you. Yes, considering that's how he is. The biggest problem for a peaceful persuasion and reconciliation was Vandali's emotions towards the reincarnated individuals. If they were compulsive emotions like hatred and a desire to kill, the two of them would still have some hope. According to Rod Corti's information, Vandali was rational, or he was at least trying to be. That was why Izumi and Aran, who hadn't directly caused Vandali any harm, might have been able to negotiate with Vandali, depending on how they approached him. But the emotions that Vandali felt towards the reincarnated individuals were unhappiness and disgust. They were simply troublesome, and it was tedious for Vandali to even become involved with them. They were bothersome and an eyesore, so he didn't want to see them or have anything to do with them. Considering how he had treated Kanata, this was how he felt. Simply having anything to do with Izumi and Aran would be unpleasant for Vandali. What other? Oh yeah, can't you resurrect his mother who gave birth to him in Lambda? Aran suggested. You're a god, aren't you? That is impossible, said Rod Corti. No, I mean, the rules aren't meant to be bent, but can't you make an exception in this case? It is not a problem with the rules, it is simply impossible. It seemed that Aran had assumed that the reason Rod Corti refused to resurrect a dead person was because there were rules that gods were not supposed to interfere directly with the world, but Rod Corti was simply unable to resurrect Darsa, Vandali's mother. Darsa was a dark elf, a being who would be reincarnated by Veda's circle of transmigration system. Rod Corti could not directly intervene. Rod Corti could not mention these circumstances to humans, even if they were reincarnated individuals, so Izumi and Aran were not convinced. But they saw that Rod Corti had no intention of saying any more, so they started considering other ideas. But no bright ideas occurred to them. In the end, they settled on a very simple plan to convince Vandali. They would appeal to his emotions. It was like bringing the relatives of hostage-holding criminals in order to appeal to them. What do you think, Shimada-san? Asked Ran. He was your classmate, wasn't he? I don't think he had any friends. Even I wasn't his friend, said Izumi. It was over 20 years ago, so I'm not certain, but I don't remember ever seeing him talking to anyone. As her image would suggest, Shimada Izumi had been a class representative on Earth, but she had almost no memories of Vandali, who had been known as Amamiya Hiroto back then. He hadn't caused any problems, but he hadn't been particularly exceptional, either. He had never become involved with any other students. He had been a boy who was always a part of the background. Though Izumi searched her memories, the only thing that she could remember was that she didn't remember anything about him. If there was anything that could work, it would be Naru's Narumi, whom Vandali had risked his life to try and save before he died on Earth, but Izumi hesitated to suggest that they bring her up. She had been among those who dealt the final blow to him in Origin, and there was no telling whether he had any interest in her now. So, someone in Origin who could persuade Vandali there aren't any other? Said Izumi. Have you been listening to me? Rod Corti asked her. Sorry, it was just a wild idea. Forget it, said Izumi. I will answer you just in case, said Rod Corti. He did not have a single family member, friend or lover. As I thought. It was obvious that the father and mother who had sold Vandali in Origin would not be suitable for persuading him. There were those involved in the research laboratory, but Vandali had killed as many of them as possible after being killed and becoming an undead himself. The only ones left are the members of the 8th Guidance, but they're hostile towards us, said Aran. They wouldn't cooperate with us, would they? Izumi said in agreement. The leader of the 8th Guidance, the girl who had been rescued by the undead Amamiya Hiroto, was a self-proclaimed priestess of death who called herself a Pluto. She had made it clear through her criminal acts that she held a fierce hatred for the Bravers and agencies that conducted research into the death attribute. The reason she had accepted Murakami and several other former Bravers as allies despite this was unknown, but it was unlikely that she had been uninvolved in Izumi and Ran's deaths. She and the other central members of her organization formed what was more of a cult-like group of fanatics than a terrorist organization. Even if she was killed and brought here, it was unlikely that she would cooperate with the reincarnated individuals. It is possible that she could be used as a hostage against Vandali, so I am planning to summon her here when she dies. However, said Rod Corti. Izumi and Aran looked at each other. Isn't this guy way too cowardly for a god? Maybe he's cowardly because he's a god. Being a god, Rod Corti overheard this silent exchange between the two, but just like Kanata, he paid no heed to them. Then isn't there anyone on Earth who could persuade him? On second thought, you don't have to answer. Show us our records and we'll use that to decide, said Izumi. Also, can you make it so that we can use our abilities? Asked Ran. I think it will help somewhat. Very well, Rod Corti replied. Izumi and Aran looked at the video and audio information from Earth that was given to them by Rod Corti to see if there was anyone who could possibly persuade Vandali. Among the other high school students who had survived the school field trip, there was nobody. There were none among the upperclassmen and underclassmen who hadn't been on the field trip, either. Because he had been working a part-time job, Amamiya Hiroto hadn't taken part in any club or committee activities, so he hadn't been acquainted with anyone other than his classmates. As for the place that he worked at, he had only performed work such as organizing endless piles of letters, early morning paper deliveries and handing out leaflets, work that didn't really provide any proper human interactions. It seemed that he hadn't had any dependable senpais, close coworkers or kuhais, either. Deciding to go further back in time, Izumi and Aran searched further to see if there was anyone from his middle school days and found themselves feeling dizzy, as if they would be overwhelmed by the total lack of human relationships. When they checked the records of his elementary school days, they really were overwhelmed by the total lack of human relationships. And began to feel headaches. He had quite a miserable childhood, said Izumi. Continuing on and on with a dark school life that can be found anywhere that isn't grand or dramatically horrible is amazing in its own way, isn't it? Said Aran. But seeing how he was in high school, you'd have never imagined how he behaved and talked as an elementary school kid. Normally, people would have at least a single new person in their lives, but Amamiya Hiroto didn't have a single one in his entire lifetime. Of course, it wasn't as if everyone had bullied him, but just because they didn't bully him didn't mean that they were on good terms with him. He had been someone who was part of the background. Just like he had been in high school. Now that they had come this far, they had a bad feeling about this and felt that there was no other option but to look at the records from Amamiya Hiroto's family. Seeing his suspicious behavior as a child, I can guess what we're going to see, but Aran murmured. As he looked at the record, he saw that his suspicions were on the mark. But without giving up, he saw that the uncle and his wife who had adopted Amamiya Hiroto, and his younger cousin, were still alive. Thinking that perhaps they had changed their ways and they could perhaps apologize to Vandal in order to help convince him, Aran looked through their records as well. What he saw was pitiful. After Amamiya Hiroto had died in the incident, his uncle's family took the money from his life insurance, the entirety of the fortune left behind by Hiroto's parents and the condolence money that people had given them to live even more luxurious lives than before. However, starting with this money, their business failed. The project that they started to try and recoup these losses also failed. This process repeated itself several times and, in the end, they gradually lost their fortune. Once their financial situation worsened, the uncle and his wife began to abuse their own son. They were unable to maintain their sanity now that Amamiya Hiroto, their punching bag, was gone. They had still managed while they were still wealthy, but now that they were at the end of their rope, they needed a target to take out their stress on. As Amamiya Hiroto was dead, their son had been chosen as their new punching bag. Of course, their son did not quietly accept his fate as a punching bag. Unlike Amamiya Hiroto, who had been treated as such since childhood, he was already a university student by the time this had happened. He left the house and distanced himself from his parents. And so the family separated. Now that his outlet for stress was gone, the uncle began harassing his subordinates horribly at his company, and him being sued for this was the final straw. Now that they had lost their entire fortune, he and his wife divorced. After that, the uncle became homeless. His ex-wife managed to live on welfare for a while, but was then arrested for theft. After that, she went in and out of prison for theft and other petty crimes. Ironically, their son got the live-in job that Amamiya Hiroto would likely have taken after graduating high school, barely managing to earn enough to sustain himself. But he never worked seriously, so he was still doing subordinate work. It was likely that a few years after the uncle turned cold on some unknown roadside, it would be his son's turn to live on the streets. The only thing that they had in common was that they both whispered to themselves, "I want to go back in time." They wanted to go back to after Amamiya Hiroto had died and they were able to spend their large sums of money as they pleased. Seeing these records, Izumi and Aran were at their wits' end. Even if we had them meet Vandal after they died, it doesn't seem likely that they would sincerely apologize to him, said Izumi. They might apologize insincerely, since he's a powerful person now, said Aran. In any case, it didn't seem like they would be useful to persuade Vandal. But considering how miserable he was, I admire him for not being in despair and hanging himself before dying on the ferry, said Aran. He was surprisingly positive and forward-thinking. So it seems, said Izumi. But it's strange that he became so popular as soon as his third life began. It's not as if he suddenly learned communication skills. If he could do that, he would have made at least one friend on Earth. The truth was that the circumstances seen in the records of Vandal's past on Earth and the circumstances in Lambda were completely different. Vandal had been surrounded by people who were his enemies and people who were not his enemies. In Lambda, he had many enemies, but he also had many allies. It was hard to imagine that they were simply after Vandal's power, either. Aran responded to Izumi's doubts. It's probably the effect of that death attribute charm skill, he said. From what we've seen in the records, the way he treats people hasn't changed much from when he was on Earth. It seems that he's still not good at getting closer to others on his own, either. But I think he had a similar ability in Origin as well. That would explain why the 8th Guidance are so fanatical. I see, it's no wonder he's loved by the undead, said Izumi. They had come to a conclusion as to why Vandal had such rich human relations in Lambda, but the situation that they were in had not changed at all. I'll ask just in case. Isn't there any way we can have his real parents from Earth persuade him? Izumi asked. She was asking whether it was possible for Rod Corti to summon the only people who had ever shown love for Amamiya Hiroto on Earth, the ones who had died in an accident before they knew what was going on. But as expected, the answer was not a good one. Amamiya Hiroto's parents on Earth have already been reincarnated, said Rod Corti. They have lost memories of their previous lives and are now living their new lives in separate places. If you still think it is wise, I can summon them here when they die. Ah, that would be meaningless, Izumi said. In Rod Corti's circle of transmigration system, there was no heaven or hell. It was normal for people to be reincarnated straight away once they died. Thus, Vandali's original parents, the only people that he might possibly feel a desire to meet, had long since lost their memories and been reborn as completely different people. Just to be sure, where are his parents and what are they doing? Asked Ran. His father has been reborn as a single mother who is managing a restaurant in France while raising her 2 children, said Rod Corty. His mother is being raised. Raised? Aran repeated. In a certain household, as a pet tortoise. As to be expected with reincarnation. People could be reborn with not only a different race and gender, but even as a member of a different species. This is hopeless, said Aran. Shimada-san, let's give up on this. Wait, Aran, said Izumi. Isn't your favorite saying, no matter what, there is always a way? What about your calculation? I've been using it for a while, but there's almost no chance of persuading him, said Aran. If the 2 of us beg for mercy or make a promise not to harm him, our chance of success is almost 100%. But, Rod Corty looked at the 2 of them and thought that it would be best to not have them reincarnate in Lambda. He had known that they were unlikely to become assassins for him, but not only would they not get involved with Vandali, they were likely to become hindrances for the other reincarnated individuals. But it was impossible to have them reincarnate anywhere but Lambda now. He didn't even consider cursing them like he had done with Vandali. If he did, it would only give them more reason to become Vandali's allies. It was possible to completely erase their memories and personalities before reincarnating them, but Rod Corty had a far better idea. Then how about you do not reincarnate and become my familiar spirits instead? He suggested. This idea was to make these 2 his familiar spirits. Hearing this, Izumi and Aran looked up at Rod Corty with suspicious expressions. Normally, one would feel honored to be spoken to personally by a god. But it seemed that Rod Corty's image in the minds of these 2 had already collapsed. Familiar spirits? Are you telling us to become nuns? Asked Izumi. No, familiar spirits are not clergymen or followers, said Rod Corty. Perhaps it will be easier for you to understand if I described them as angels. Describe them with more simple terms, said Aran. Assistants, support staff, system engineers. These were the descriptions that Rod Corty gave when he complied with Aran's request. There was no mystery or divinity to these descriptions, but this was the truth, so there was no helping it. Aran looked dejected upon hearing this answer, but Izumi's expression stiffened and she asked another question. What would change by us becoming familiar spirits? Can you influence our wills and actions as you please? You will ascend to become living beings with no physical bodies. You can interpret this as a transformation, said Rod Corty. I have no intention of restricting the freedom of your thoughts and actions, but I will punish you if you act disloyally. I see. In other words, it's like being employed at a company, said Izumi. Other than the fact that we probably can't return to being humans again. So, what do you want to make us do? Assist in the transportation of souls in Lambda, Earth and Origin through the circles of transmigration, said Rod Corty. Rod Corty was trying to turn Shimada, Izumi and Machida Aran into his familiar spirits and have them support his circle of transmigration system. With this, they would never become involved with anyone whose soul didn't return to the circle of transmigration, let alone Vandali. Even if they were on Vandali's side in their minds, they wouldn't be able to do anything for him. In fact, they would not be performing any hostile acts that would cause Vandali harm, so Rod Corty thought that it would be easier for them to agree to this. And it was also true that Rod Corty had been wanting support personnel to help him deal with the errors that Vandali had been causing. Izumi and Aran looked at each other and discussed this, but it seemed that they had come to a conclusion very quickly. All right, said Izumi. It's out of character for me to be an angel, but I want to see Murakami and the others' faces when they come here, too, said Aran. The 2 of them agreed to become Rod Corty's familiar spirits. As long as immortality did not exist, their fellow bravers would come to this place once they died in Origin. Other than being able to warn them not to do anything reckless, they believed that this was for both Earth and Origin's sakes. It seemed that Rod Corty felt no sense of danger, but if he continued to aim for Vandali's life, it was certain that one of them would eventually die or end up in a state very close to death. But Rod Corty governed the circles of transmigration in not only Lambda, but Izumi and Aran's home world of Earth and Origin as well. These could not be allowed to stop. They had to make sure that the circles of transmigration in Earth and Origin would continue functioning even if something happened to Rod Corty. That was what the 2 of them had decided to do. Of course, Rod Corti understood these intentions, but as he didn't feel any risk that his own life would be in danger, he decided that these two would actually be more useful if they became capable of doing these things, so he turned them into his familiar spirits. Now then, I, Rod Corti, the god of reincarnation, shall make you two my familiar spirits, Rod Corti declared. Be sure to work hard from now on. As particles of light fell from his raised hands and poured onto Izumi and Aran, they ascended to greater beings. And then the two of them had this thought, at least we're divine in appearance. Even though we're just support staff. Chapter 103, The Disappointed Half-Vampire and the Mad Purebreed Vampire. Despite having no scales, Vandali had acquired the title of Scale King. The Scale King title was normally something that Fidig, the dragon god of 5 sins, bestowed upon those who had solo cleared the D-class dungeon known as the Lizardman's Nest as proof that they were the new ruler of the marshlands, so apparently having scales or not made no difference. Next, though it was unclear how effective this would be, Vandali tried to acquire Fidig's divine protection, or rather, make him grant his divine protection, but Fidig had replied that it was impossible and hung his head. What do you mean? Asked Vandali. That is, my current state is insufficient. Divine protections are normally things that a superior being bestows upon an inferior being, so, for example, it'd be effective for a fox to borrow a tiger's power. But there wouldn't be any point in a tiger borrowing a fox's power. It's kind of like that. It was an easy-to-understand explanation of divine protections that would likely cause people to lose their faith in gods. And it seemed that Fidig, the dragon god of 5 sins, was the fox and Vandali was the tiger. I see, said Vandali. So, you're saying that it's impossible because you haven't fully recovered yet? The truth was that Vandali, who was capable of manipulating the Demon King's fragments perfectly and possessed a greater total mana pool than Fidig, would not be so different in status from Fidig even if Fidig had fully recovered. In fact, it would not be strange to think of Vandali as the superior being, as he had more freedom with the physical body and possessed weapons that were capable of slaying gods. But this was how Vandali had interpreted things. Although the being before Vandali was prostrating himself and begging for his life, no matter how little dignity he had, he was still a god. Gods were beings that were capable of creation, incredible miracles and cursing people with terrible wrath. Vandali simply assumed without thinking that this god would be far greater than him once the god fully recovered. No, even if I were to make a full recovery, I am not such a great being, Fidig replied honestly. He's making himself seem small for now. He's not someone I can underestimate, Vandali thought, thinking more highly of him now. Fidig could only see the gaze of dead eyes looking at him, so he was completely oblivious to this misunderstanding as well, however. Still, when I tried to grant you my divine protection, I touched your soul, and, how do I put it? Its shape is, perhaps I could describe it as beyond unworldly. Could it be that you've eaten one of us evil gods or one of our followers? Fidig did not have the state of mind to see the misunderstanding. He was too busy with having learned that Vandali's soul was not that of a person. The shape and color of a soul was unique like a fingerprint, there were no two that were alike. But the shape of Vandali's soul was simply too strange. Even if the Demon King's fragments were taken into account. No, not that I remember, said Vandali. Has there ever been an incident where you touched a cursed item or something similar, and your attribute values and skills changed right afterwards? Fidig asked. I did read a cursed book once, said Vandali. My mana increased by 50 million, and I became able to extend my tongue. That's it. All of Fidig's heads shouted together. The forbidden tome that Vandali had read after trespassing into the Mages Guild of the city of Niaki in the Hartner Duchy. Fidig suspected that this tome had contained an evil god or a follower of similar status, and Vandali had absorbed him. Boy, spit it out. You must quickly spit it out, shouted Zadyrus. Botjan, you mustn't eat strange things, exclaimed Rita. You'll get a stomachache. No, I think it'd be amazing if all he got was a stomachache and it's not like he ate it, right? Said Vigoro. And that was over a year ago. Is it not too late to spit it out now? Said Princess Livia. Ah, I'm getting déjà vu, Vandali thought in a carefree manner as Zadyrus and Rita held him upside down and shook him up and down. Was he your friend? If so, then I'm sorry, said Darcy, apologizing. I'm sure Vandali didn't mean any harm. No, I do not believe that there were any who turned away from the Demon King who would hide in a book. And judging from what we have heard about that book, it seems that there was a trap that takes over the minds of any people that read it. Quite frankly, he got what deserved. being absorbed like that. Fidig seemed satisfied now that he had solved the mystery. The truth was that Buberdura, the evil god of the magic tome, had been an evil god who was part of the remnants of the Demon King's army, so he was not a companion or friend of Fidig, he was an enemy. And, of course, Fidig felt no sense of racial unity with the other evil gods, so even if an evil god from the same foreign world as him were to be annihilated, as long as they weren't allies, he would simply feel happy that he had one less enemy. However, I believe that this is one of the reasons I cannot grant you my divine protection, he said. In fact, Fidig was grateful that there was now a proper reason that proved that he wasn't simply refusing to grant a divine protection because he didn't want to regret it later. I see. Well, it's impossible, so it can't be helped, said Vigoro. That's right, it can't be helped, said Rita. Indeed. How about you raise your heads now? Zadaris suggested. Everyone other than Vandali was a little intimidated by Fidig. They couldn't tell the difference between the two by the size of their mana pools, so they feared Fidig, who was the dragon god of 5 sins, more. One might wonder why they feared someone who was prostrating themselves, but considering that this pitiful being was a monster that was larger than a castle, it was understandable. No matter how pitiful and miserable it looked, for Vigoro and the others, a god was still a god. Then please grant your divine protections to the lizardmen and suitable individuals from Taylorsheim instead, said Vandali. In exchange, I'll place a statue of you in the church. The statues of Alder and his gods had all been removed, so there was plenty of space in the Church of Vida. This is something that I could not have even wished for. Fidig's 3 heads exclaimed. An increase in the number of people praying to him would mean that the recovery of his power would accelerate. It made no difference to him that he would not be the only god worshipped by those people. Also, I have a few questions, so please answer them, said Vandali. I understand. And so, Vandali and his companions came to know the truths of what had happened 100,000 years ago that almost no people of the current age were aware of. They had acquired a certain amount of information about the past from Turnisha, whose soul Vandali had already broken, but she hadn't been in a particularly prominent position during the battle between Vida and Alder. In contrast, while Fidig had not been particularly influential, he had been the commander of a battalion. Most importantly, Turnisha had lost more than half of her sanity, so the fragmentation and distortion of the memories of the distant past was severe. But the memories of Fidig, whose mental structure was different from those of mortals, were almost completely accurate. Vandali and his companions learned of the achievements of Zakat and the other creation-minded champions, and the circumstances surrounding their destruction at the hands of the Demon King. They learned of the state that Zakat had been in when he became a parent of the true ancestor of the vampires. And they learned that Zantak and the other subordinate gods had fought on Vida's side, and now they were scattered all over the world. Vandali had thought that Vida and her allies had been more alone while fighting against Bellwood and the other champions, so he was happy to learn the truth that she had many allies on her side. And the fact that some of her allies were those who were considered to be evil gods was a greatly beneficial piece of information. The fact that they could be negotiated with was valuable as well, even if they weren't Vandali's allies now. Well, I won't be negotiating with Hihiri though, said Vandali. This was only natural, as Hihiri was responsible for his father's death. According to Turnisha, he had sent a divine message with an order to kill Vandali, and it didn't seem that he would be interested in talking things out, either. Incidentally, as one would expect, Fidig was unaware that Vandali's soul was a combination of Zakat, Ark and the other creation-minded champions. Despite being a god, he did not possess the eyes to know the 100,000-year-old history of a soul by simply looking at it. So that is what happened, said Zadiris. They never did anything good, did they, those people of Alders? Wouldn't this cause chaos among Alders believers if it was known to the people on the outside? What do you think, Van? Asked Bazdier. It's probably impossible for us to convince anyone of anything, said Vandali. That's true, said Darsa. Vandali is a damper, Bazdier-san and the others are ghouls, I am a spirit and Livia-san and the others are undead. And the one who told us this information is an evil god. Everyone here was someone who would be persecuted at best, slaughtered at worst, by the believers of Alder. The peaceful faction would likely listen to Vandali's words, but it was difficult to imagine that they would believe a truth that was inconvenient to the gods and heroes they worshipped, a truth that was different to the truth that they had believed as soon as they had become conscious. And the source of this information was a grotesque evil god. There wasn't a single piece of hard, immovable evidence. Even if he were to wear a magic item that made it impossible to lie, which Vandali wasn't sure existed, people would simply think, the poor thing, being fooled by an evil god and being made to believe such lies. Now then, I'll ask another question for a change of mood, said Vandali. You seem to be on Veda's side now, but why is it that you didn't have the lizardmen worship Veda? Fidig's own revival was important, but Veda's revival should have been much more important to him. Despite that, there were no signs of the lizardmen having worshipped Veda. Their generations passed more quickly than those of humans, but there still should have been remains of shrines. Tens of thousands of years have passed since Fidig created a dungeon to produce lizardmen to be his followers. If he'd made even a tenth of them believe in Veda as well during that time, wouldn't Veda's revival have progressed more as well? Vandali thought. But Fidig had a unique, proper reason for this. That is true, but that would have been harsh on me. Veda did indeed seem to have had her divinity taken from her by Alda, but even so, she was one of the most well-known goddesses in this world. Even now, there is a steady number of worshippers who pray to her. But I'm a nameless evil god. If I don't make my own believers, nobody would pray to me. In other words, it seemed to be a problem of how well the gods were known. Even now, there was a steady number of believers in Veda who were not members of the races that she had created. Despite the beliefs regarding the races originating from Alda's followers, Veda was still considered a goddess of equal rank to Alda and significantly respected. But Fidig's name was nowhere to be seen in historical records. Because he was a nameless evil god, there was absolutely zero chance of people coming to believe in him through normal methods. In fact, when he had awakened, he had found that he had no followers at all. That was why he had made the lizardmen worship only him. Having believers of other gods praying to him would have provided him with some power, but he would gain more power if those believers worshipped only him. And even if Fidig had made the lizardmen pray to Veda, it would have made a great deal of difference to him, but for Veda, it would only have been a drop in the bucket. To give an extreme example, it would have been like pouring half of the water in a cup into a lake. I see, I understand now, said Vandali. Now then, about the other fragments of the Demon King, Vandali and his companions asked question after question about the Demon King's fragments, the other evil gods that had joined Veda, the gods such as the Sun Giant Talos, the current status of Veda's new races, the situation of the continent's southern region and Veda's current state. But what Fidig knew was limited to what had happened up to the point that he escaped the battle with Veda 100,000 years ago. In any case, I slumbered for tens of thousands of years after that, so I do not have the slightest idea as to what the others are doing. I did search the area that I can see, but that's limited to half of these marshlands. Just 100 years ago, I did get the feeling that I heard something. But by then, I'd already been sealed by Lufsful, the raging evil dragon god, so it might have just been my imagination. However, I do believe that Mubabujinj, the evil god of degenerate corpulence, is within the noble orc empire. The evil god of octopuses? No, degenerate corpulence. It means, to become degenerate and fat. For a moment, Vandali had thought that this was a god of fishermen and marine products, but it seemed that he was actually a god who ruled over corpulence. The boar beast king had betrayed the beast god Ganpaplio and used the power given to him by the demon king Euguranes to give birth to the orcs and noble orcs. The orcs had apparently been created first, and then the noble orcs created after them in order to act as the orcs' commanders. But the boar beast king had been defeated and sealed away by the champion Farman. After that, the demon king had failed to find a successor to the boar beast king and apparently assigned numerous subordinates, including Mubabujinj, the evil god of degenerate corpulence, to command the orcs and grow their numbers. And so when Mubabujinj had accepted Zakat's invitation, the noble orcs and orcs that had been serving him then had changed sides as well. Are they allies? Asked Vandali. Then they could have executed him instead of exiling him, Zadaris grumbled. The ghouls, who had suffered greatly at the hands of Bugogan, and the ghoul king Vandali, were not pleased by this. They likely didn't have any ill thoughts against the noble orc empire, where Bugogan had been defeated in a power struggle and essentially exiled, but they didn't know to react if the noble orcs were to suddenly tell them, "We're actually your allies, Bui Bui. And we were going to have a noble orc buffet once things settled down in the marshlands," said Vandali. Everyone was looking forward to it, too, said Vigoro. Fidig shuddered. Noble orcs were rank 6 at minimum, and 100,000 years ago, there had been no small number of noble orc individuals who had surpassed rank 10. Even now, their empire likely possessed more military might than medium-sized human nations. But Fidig could clearly imagine Vandali and his companions turning that empire into a pork buffet. Well, They were allies in the past, but it is uncertain as to whether they are allies to us now. After that battle, there might be some who went off to do as they pleased, though I cannot say for certain, but I think it'd be best to check. This was quite a strange viewpoint, but Fidig couldn't provide any guarantees on Mubabujinji's personality, either. The relationships between evil gods who had formerly been in the Demon King's army was such that they would steal each other's achievements and betray each other when given the opportunity, so there were no bonds of trust between them. They had communicated with each other to some extent after accepting Zakat's offer and changing sides, but apparently, they had simply been acquaintances from the same place. There had been some exceptions where evil gods had good relationships with each other, but most of those relationships were described as abnormal. It seemed that because they were evil gods, even if they were all gods, their mental structures were all different. And although Fidig didn't know this, there were those like the pure-breed vampires who obeyed evil gods, such as Turnisha and her two former partners. They changed sides once, but now that Zakat and the other creation-minded champions had been destroyed and Vida had become unable to act, there was no being certain that they would be allies. "Well, I understand," said Vandali. "Let's try making contact when the time comes." "Not right after you return?" Fidig asked. "There's a place that I personally want to visit before that. I don't think it will take that long, though." "I see. More importantly, this is the last question. Would your power be useful for creating a homunculus?" Vandali's question contained an enormous amount of silent pressure, as if to say, if it would, then hand it over, right now. Fidig cowered instinctively as he answered. "Homunculus. I am not well versed in alchemy, so, even when I created monsters, I could only create lizardmen. After that, I left it to the dungeon. I think I could manage making one with scales." "Scales," Vandali repeated. "I didn't have any scales, did I?" said Dasa. The two of them could only shake their heads in response to this very disappointing answer. Vandali returned from the Scale King's nest, having acquired resplendent treasures and the Scale King title. The lizardmen swore absolute loyalty and obedience to him. Perhaps due to the effect of the Scale King title, some of the lizardmen had started to become affected by demon path enticement. At this rate, the lizardmen would be able to remain loyal citizens of Taylorsheim for 1,000 or 2,000 years, as long as Vandali still lived. And now that his leveling had finished, he set about with Eleonora and Bellman's surgeries. Name, Vandali race, Damper, Dark Elf age, 8 years old. Title: Ghoul King, Eclipse King, Second Coming of the Demon King, Guardian of the Cultivation Villages, Holy Son of Vida, Monstrosity, Scale King. New job, Demon Guider level, 68. Job history, Death attribute Mage, Golem Transmuter, Undead Tamer, Soul Breaker, Venom Fist user, Insect user, Treecaster attributes, Vitality, 1438 mana, 815,878,554, plus 163,175,710 strength, 601 agility, 552 stamina, 806 intelligence, 1663, passive skills, superhuman strength, level 5 rapid healing, level 8, level up. Death attribute magic, level 9, level up. Status effect resistance, level 7 magic resistance, level 5, level up. Dark vision demon path enticement, level 1 chant revocation, level 6, level up. Guidance, demon path, level 2, level up. Automatic mana recovery, level 6 strengthened subordinates, level 6 venom secretion, claws, fangs, tongue, level 5, level up. Enhanced agility, level 3, level up. Body expansion, tongue, level 5, level up. Strengthened attack power while unarmed, small enhanced physical ability, hair, claws, tongue, fangs, level 4, level up. Thread refining, level 3, level up. Mana enlargement, level 2, level up. Active skills, bloodwork, level 3 surpass limits, level 7, level up. Golem transmutation, level 8, level up. No attribute magic, level 7, level up. Mana control, level 6 spirit form, level 7 carpentry, level 6 engineering, level 4 cooking, level 5 alchemy, level 5, level up. Unarmed fighting technique, level 6, level up. Soul break, level 8 multicast, level 5 long distance control, level 7 surgery, level 4, level up. Parallel thought processing, level 5 4 coordination, level 4 high-speed thought processing, level 4, level up. Commanding, level 4 plant binding technique, level 4, level up. Thread reeling, level 5, level up. Throwing, level 5, level up. Scream, level 4, level up. Dead spirit magic, level 4, level up. Insect binding technique, level 4, level up. Blacksmithing, level 1 artillery technique, level 3, level up. Unique skills, Godslayer, level 6 grotesque mind, level 6 mental encroachment, level 5 labyrinth construction, level 6, level up. Demon King fusion, level 2 abyss, level 1 Demon King fragments, blood horns, curses, experience gained in previous life not carried over, cannot learn existing jobs, unable to gain experience independently. There was a noise resembling the sound of a ripe fruit being smashed, and blood, flesh and bone fragments scattered across the ground. Hi. Government-sama has gone mad. Please calm yourself, Government-sama. The one that the blood, flesh and bone fragments had belonged to was a vampire, as were the others who were watching, completely petrified. They were all noble-born vampires, who had all lived for at least several hundred years. These were vampires worthy of being the villains in epic heroic songs and the tales of saints that the protagonists would fight difficult battles against and only barely manage to defeat. They were the powerful noblemen who haunted the darkness of the utmost depths of the underworld. But right now, they were pitiful creatures that were screaming and trying to escape a single old man. What is this? Do you have complaints about my actions, you bastards? You are traitors, aren't you? Gubberman glared at the vampires with bloodshot eyes. A beautiful, ladylike vampire woman gave a blood-curdling scream. In the next moment, her entire body twisted limply and fell apart, as if it had been ruptured. Run. We're going to be killed. You No, help me, Letting out tears, nasal mucus and screams that would normally be let out by their victims, the noble-born vampires fled. Gubberman showed no signs of giving chase. Every single one of you, you traitors. Even though I, Gubberman, have given you eternal life through my blood. Berkine's dogs. He spat, his shoulders heaving up and down. He was cursing these vampires as if he intended to put a hex on them, but there was no proof that any of them were traitors. In fact, Gubberman was an ally of the pure-breed vampire Berkine. There was no evidence or information that suggested that Berkine had any intention of harming him. But Gubberman had convinced himself that Berkine was trying to turn him into a puppet, just as he had tried to do to Turnisha, and that some of his subordinates had betrayed him and joined Berkine's side. These were nothing more than delusions created by Gubberman's paranoia, but none could make him open his clouded eyes. The bonds of trust between the pure-breed vampires that worshipped Hihirishukaka, the evil god of joyful life, had barely held together up until now, but now they had collapsed entirely. For Gubberman, even the vampires that he had given his own blood to could not be trusted. Gubberman had spent a large amount of time indulging in his own hobbies. Unlike Turnisha, who had exceptional, highly loyal retainers known as the Five Dogs, he had no subordinates that he could trust. In fact, he had become unable to even remember the names and faces of the vampires that he had killed just moments earlier. At this rate, that Berkine will what am I to do? Oh, that's it. There is no need for me to surround myself with those that I cannot trust. So then, I simply need to turn all of my subordinates into undead, do I not? Gubberman's warped, twisted mind gave birth to the most terrible of ideas. But he himself had no doubts whatsoever that it was a good idea, and he quickly began gathering the pieces of flesh before him with space attribute magic. These would not be fit to add to my collection of undead heroes, but no matter. I am magnanimous, after all, My subordinates can now become a part of my beloved collection. I am sure that they would happily offer me their lives. After all, I am the one who granted them eternal life. Name, Zadaris rank, 8 race, Ghoul Wizard level, 70 job, Philosopher job level, 51 job history, Apprentice Mage, Mage, Light Attribute Mage, Wind Attribute Mage age, 297 years old, has undergone age reversal. Passive skills, Night Vision Pain Resistance, Level 3 Superhuman Strength, Level 1 Paralyzing Venom Secretion, Claws, Level 2 Increased Mana Recovery Rate, Level 7, Level Up. Mana Enlargement, Level 2, New. Active Skills, Light Attribute Magic, Level 8, Level Up. Wind Attribute Magic, Level 7, Level Up. No Attribute Magic, Level 3, Level Up. Mana control, level 7, level up. Alchemy, level 4, level up. Chant revocation, level 4, level up. Multicast, level 3, level up. Surpass limits, level 3, level up. Housework, level 1, new. Monster explanation, Ghoul Wizard, a race titled that can only be achieved by ghouls who have exceptional skill in multiple attributes of magic and have performed much diligent study. Almost none have appeared since the ghoul race was born, and there are almost no documents recording their existence, even in the archives of the Mages Guild. However, their existence was recorded in the notes of an ancient philosopher, and according to his description, they are wielders of fearsome magic while also being wise leaders. However, many researchers believe that he confused these ghoul wizards with ghoul elder mages, and are skeptical of their existence. Chapter 104, There's nothing that can be done, but I want rice. There were several men on a mountain in the region that was formerly the Sauron Duchy, now occupied by the Amid Empire. Tentacles were twisting and crawling around in front of them, hitting the water surface and sending muddy water into the air. This thing, it's still alive? Fire, fire. The panicked archers hastily nocked arrows with their tips covered in a green fluid in their short bows and pulled back their bowstrings. Don't panic, it's already dead, shouted a young man with characteristic bangs and a well-featured face, but several arrows fired by the archers buried themselves in the ominously quivering creature with thudding noises. But the tentacles wouldn't stop writhing. The young man clicked his tongue and reprimanded the archers. I explained this beforehand, the lower bodies of these things don't stop moving for a while even after they've died. Even if you cut their heads off or split their upper bodies in half, they keep squirming around for a bit. Octopuses. The young man was about to explain that octopuses were the same, but stopped himself. He had grown up in a coastal town, but he had just remembered that many of the archers were from inland regions, so even if they knew that creatures called octopuses existed, they would have only seen them as dried food products or pickled in vinegar. They're like lizards' tails, the young man said. They flail around for a while, don't they? This was actually for a completely different reason, but what the young man needed to give the archers right now was not proper education, but composure. I see. Indeed, as expected of Vice Captain Rick, you're so knowledgeable. This goal was accomplished, the archers regained their composure and lowered their bows. The arrows that they used and the poison coating the arrowheads were special, so they couldn't be fired wastefully. Don't relax too much, we'll have to put it on display once it stops moving, said Rick. What will we do about the magic stone and materials? Asked one of his subordinates. Don't touch them, of course, said Rick. We're short on money, but it would be bad if by some small chance someone found out that we were the ones who have been killing these things. That's true, too. Seeing his subordinate return his disassembling knife to its sheath, Rick waded into the marsh towards the creature that had lost its balance and toppled over the silo woman. Her eyes were still wide open in disbelief as Rick grabbed her loosely hanging, mud-covered hand. Sorry, but I'll take this back, Rick murmured. I'll be using it for the next one as well, you see. And then he took the ring, which he had given to her just moments before, from her thin finger. Dispose of her. The archers obeyed Rick's order and switched from their short bows to hand axes, and set about turning the silo into a repulsive mess. They severed all of her tentacles and hacked into the upper body below her neck, with their blows particularly focused around her breasts. Vice Captain Rick, this occurs to me every time, but why do we cut their chests up so much? And wouldn't it be faster to use axe technique to cut them from the waist below in one go rather than cutting their tentacles off one by one? Another subordinate asked. This is more humiliating for them, Rick replied. I don't understand it, but the tentacles on the lower bodies of Silo are apparently equivalent to a woman's hair, a part of their bodies that they are supposed to be proud of. And the chest symbolizes maternity for women who worship Vedasama, it's the place that contains the heart, which is Veda's holy symbol. The same applies for these things. If we want to desecrate these bodies, this is the best way, even if it is troublesome. And the reason that the men didn't damage the faces was to ensure that the other Sila who discovered the corpses would be able to identify them easily. I see, the subordinate murmured. In other words, it wasn't wasted effort. They were aiming for the body parts of cultural and symbolic importance. Even if they aren't people, how can he destroy bodies in such a rational way? The man wondered, his face turning pale. Don't make that face, said Rick, giving the subordinate a small, bitter smile. Do I look like I'm doing this because I enjoy it? Eh? But don't you hate Scylla, Vice Captain? It's true that I hold Scylla in contempt. But even so, I respect myself. I don't have any bizarre interests like poisoning women and toying with their corpses. Rick's bitter smile grew wider, and then his face straightened into a serious expression as he continued. This plan is indeed something that we can never tell others about in pride, something disgraceful. It can't be called justice, it's something that only scum would carry out. But I want you to remember. We are in a vastly weaker position. We can't achieve victory by being picky with our methods, and if we can't achieve victory, we can't save this nation. Our companions, and even the Scylla that we've killed, will have died for nothing. We mustn't disappoint them. I want you to believe in me and my older brother, and follow my lead. Yes, Vice Captain Rick Paris. We will follow you wherever you may go. The men declared in unison, overcome with emotion from Rick's speech. Perhaps they saw their commander, who showed no hesitation to dirty his own hands, as well as themselves, as solitary heroes. Perhaps they were intoxicated on the feeling of superiority from the knowledge that they were fighting for a noble cause. And then Rick and his men tied the Scylla's corpse to the trunk of a tree growing on the marsh's edge and left after applying the finishing touches. A gruesome corpse covered in blood and mud was abandoned there, along with the tentacles and pieces of flesh floating in the mud of the marsh. A beautiful, red-haired woman was tied to the operating table by sturdy chains that had been wrapped around her limbs over and over again. She was wearing only a single strange, thin cloth, leaving the pure white skin of the area where her thighs joined into her back exposed. There were curved, stiff scars visible there. As a beautiful, yet mysterious song echoed out, hands so white that they looked as if they had been covered in candle wax closed in on her silently. Scalpel, or rather, claws. Incision. Administer potion. Part number 3. The hands were skillfully carrying something out. They showed no hesitation as they used claws instead of scalpels to make incisions on the woman's skin. Their movements were accurate and there was a surprisingly small amount of bleeding. However, the surgery was being conducted without any anesthetics, so each time an incision was made, the woman's spine and shoulders trembled, and heavy breathing that sounded like small moans escaped her lips. Last of all, apply the potion and the surgery is complete. Thank you for your hard work. This was excellent work, Master. Eh? It's already over? Eleonora, who had been lying on her stomach, raised her head. It's finished, Vandali replied. He sheathed his claws and removed the chains that were binding Eleonora before starting the post-cosmetic surgery tidy up with his surgery assistant, Yamata. I explained beforehand that your surgery wouldn't take very long, didn't I, Eleonora? The cosmetic surgery carried out by transplanting the body parts of the live-dead Turnisha would have been considered a large-scale surgery on Earth, despite Eleonora having scars in only a few places. It involved not only transplanting the skin, but the flesh and blood vessels beneath it. However, with Vandali as the surgeon and Eleonora as the patient, it was a simple procedure. Vandali used spirit form transformation on a part of his body, fused them with Eleonora's body, suppressed her blood vessels and used the skillful judgment of his claws and the drugs secreted from them to stimulate their regrowth. Eleonora was also a noble-born vampire who could grow back any body parts that she was missing. Due to her status effect resistance skill, anesthesia was almost completely ineffective on her, but she was resistant to pain to begin with, so she could endure this much without any problems. Despite that, Eleonora herself had wanted her limbs to be bound, saying that it would be a big problem if by some small chance her body started to move. But a little longer, Eleonora mumbled. With medical science in its current state, it can't be helped, said Vandali. Medical science was powerless when faced with a healthy body. Seeking an ally, Eleonora glanced toward Yamata, but 3 of its heads were busy singing while the other 6 looked back at her with dull, lifeless eyes. Yamata was one of Turnisha's finest works. It was a zombie with the body of a high-rank dragon race Hydra specimen as the base and the upper bodies of beautiful women of 9 different races attached to the Hydra's necks. Vandali had taken a liking to it as well, saying that it was incredibly convenient, so it had performed all kinds of work with the surgery skill, but its intelligence was still on the level of an ordinary zombie. It did little other than obey orders, and its thinking capabilities were about the same as a small child's. But the one who became Eleonora's ally instead was Luciliano. I do not mind being shown more, he said. He was standing in this place with a cool expression, but Eleonora hadn't acknowledged him as a member of the opposite sex. His words of, I have no interest in anything but undead, that he had spoken before the surgery had been too convincing. The process of the combination of Tanisha's parts with your body is extremely fascinating, Luciliano continued. At first, they rejected each other, but the moment that the blood potion that Master created with his own blood was applied, they combined before my very eyes and there was not even any need to perform stitching. This is a true transformation. As Luciliano said, Eleonora's body had no visible scars or stitches from the surgery. As body parts had indeed been transplanted, there was nothing to be done about the skin being of a slightly different color in places, but even these looked like they were going to assimilate properly soon. So that is how it is, Master. Will you not perform a little more transplanting surgery? Luciliano requested. Like I said, she's already healthy, said Vandali. Eleonora, please drink another bottle of blood potion afterwards, and then go and rest. It cannot be helped. As Eleonora gave up and drank the blood potion with small noises coming from her white throat, her eyes began to sparkle in a bewitching way. Perhaps because blood was included in its ingredient list, blood potions appeared to have different effects on vampires. Is this all right, Master? Asked Luciliano. It doesn't seem to be harmful, so it's probably fine, said Vandali. Dana-sama, I am a little anxious. Belmond, who had been observing the surgery from the edge of the room, had broken out in a cold sweat at the sight of the mysterious-looking Eleonora. I will make such a face? How unthinkable. Being as unsightly as I am, if I were to make such an expression, Dana-sama will shun me and I do not have the confidence that I will be able to suppress my desire to end my own life in self-hatred before that happens. Belmond was frightened, but preparations for the surgery were already complete, and the mood didn't really allow for her to say that she wanted to back out now. Can you not at least make me completely unconscious before performing the surgery? She asked. If you're unconscious, the function of your rapid regeneration skill decreases, and it will be problematic to have you drink the potion afterwards, so it would be very helpful if you could stay awake, said Vandali. It will be fine. Yumata will be singing, and although the pain will continue throughout the whole thing rather than just at the beginning, we will hold you down. But it wouldn't be over so quickly that it would be finished before Belmond could count the stains on the ceiling. Unlike Eleonora, Belmond required many different parts to be transplanted. Then how about forcing me into an out-of-body experience with your magic, Dana-sama? Belmond suggested. It's not like I can't do it, but that would use up an extra process for my parallel thought processing, said Vandali. In the unlikely event that something happens, I want to have room to work with. Since his patient was Belmond, a noble-born vampire with strong vitality, it was unlikely that a serious medical error would occur, but even so, it was probably best to prepare for the worst. As to be expected of you, Dana-sama. You have no weaknesses, Belmond said, praising Vandali with a groan. That's not true, said Luciliano, slurping his fern tea that he had made himself. His own personal feelings and interests are not involved. Foo-fa-foo, rest assured. Everything will turn into pleasure soon, said Eleonora. Eleonora, please hurry and leave the room, put on your clothes and rest, said Vandali. You're making Belmond feel anxious, said Vandali. Vandali's spirit form clones carried Eleonora out along with her whole operating table, as if they were going on a little trip. This way. Let's go and rest, shall we? There are so many Vandali-samas. Vandali had known things would come to this and readied an extra operating table, so everything was still fully prepared. Still, this blood potion, does it really have those kinds of effects? Vandali wondered. When he drank it himself, other than its healing effects as a potion, it just seemed sweet and easy to drink. Well, that is how it is, said Luciliano. It is made of your own blood, after all. It seemed that even vampires didn't have an appetite for their own blood. Suddenly, they heard the slurping sound of saliva. Yumata, who always wore an empty expression, showed the light of a primitive hunger in its eyes when it looked at blood potion. It seemed that blood potions were extremely delicious to vampires and zombies, just not for Vandali. Even with Vandali's skill, Belmond's surgery took over 10 hours. Eleonora had only needed her skin and the underlying flesh to be replaced, but Belmond needed bones in certain parts and several organs transplanted as well, so perhaps Vandali should have been proud for having completed it in only 10 hours. When I examined you with spirit form transformation, several of your organs were damaged, so let's take this opportunity to renew them as well, Vandali had said. Belmond had become a vampire, so this didn't even affect her ability in battle, let alone her everyday life. However, Vandali had taken this opportunity to go as far as to perform organ transplantation. If Vandali wanted to repair these in the future but the live-dead Turnisha somehow became unusable, it would be a pain, after all. It is difficult to tell whether Danasamu is an optimistic person or a pessimistic one, Bellman thought as she sighed. She got up from the bed she was lying on and headed towards the full-length mirror that had been prepared under the assumption that the patients would want to see the results of the surgery. This was a mirror that had been created by Princess Lavia heating up some sand and Vandali using Golem transmutation to remove impurities and turn it into a glass with the appropriate shape. He truly is incredible, Belmont murmured to herself. Even royals and nobles would be astonished by this mirror. Does Danasamu not know how much a smooth mirror made of glass would be worth? She wondered as she looked at the reflection of herself in the crystal-clear mirror. And then she hardened her resolve and dropped the robe that she was wearing. The mirror reflected an image of someone that was Belmont, but at the same time, wasn't her. She was so different that she gasped and almost activated her demon eye on herself in surprise. Her previously scar-covered skin had changed color where new skin had been transplanted, looking as if it was covered in strangely shaped bruises, but it was very smooth. Her chest that was almost non-existent, where her skin had been clinging to her ribs in places, was now large and soft. She had been surprised by its weight right after the surgery, but seeing it like this was even more astonishing. It quivered a little every time she moved, and it was heavy. As for her abdomen, it had become a little thicker, as not only the skin, but flesh and organs had been transplanted as well. But this didn't make her appear fat. Belmont had been too thin to begin with. Now she had more feminine curves, and it was likely that many would be attracted to them. But these weren't the parts of Belmont's surgery that Vandali had spent the longest on. The part that had taken the longest was the bewitching curve of her bottom, or rather, the long tail that had been transplanted just above it. This was the tail of a monkey-like monster that had been defeated in the Scaled King's nest, a tail around the length of Belmon's entire body, covered in glossy fur. It was apparently a mutated variant of a chimera, but nobody had known what it was called. Vandali had thought that it resembled a Japanese chimera, but Luvsful, the raging evil dragon god, had fled, so nobody knew its exact name. But this long tail with its shiny, silver-colored fur was beautiful, so Belmont had no complaints. Simply attaching the tail would have been simple, but Vandali had even gone as far as to tamper with the inside of Belmont's brain in order to connect the muscles and nerves so that she would be able to move the tail as she wanted. As Belmont had once been a forest monkey-type beast person, there had been a dedicated part of her brain for controlling the movement of her tail, but it had apparently disappeared because so much time had passed after she lost her tail. Vandali had used death attribute magic to regenerate that part of her brain. It is fortunate that I asked Lucilianoshi to vacate the room, she said. Belmont couldn't keep up with discussions of medical knowledge that didn't exist in this world. The only thing that she understood was how unsightly a condition she had been in during the surgery, particularly when the changes had been made to her brain. But enduring it had paid off. Belmont was able to move her tail exactly as she wanted to. Her memory of the past wasn't very clear, but she even got the feeling that it moved more dexterously than the tail that she had been born with. The same applied for the rest of her body as well. Less than a day had passed since transplantation, and yet there was no numbness. When she pinched herself, she could feel the pain. If she brushed her fingertips against her skin to tickle herself, she could feel it. It was difficult to think that this skin and flesh had belonged to someone else. Of course, she felt a little discomfort from her figure changing considerably. She could move her fingers and toes the same as before the surgery, but she would have to take care as she went about her everyday life. At the very least, she would have to replace all of her clothes with new ones. Her previous clothes wouldn't be able to contain her chest, hips and buttocks. The only clothes she wouldn't need to replace were her shoes. You have put a great amount of effort into this, Danasamu. You must take responsibility for giving me such a body. What is this? Belmont. What is this? Belmont checked her status, just in case. Vandali, who had been sleeping in the bed next to Belmont, called out to her. Naturally, 10 hours of surgery had been very tiring work for him. Of course, it was also a time of day where children were supposed to be asleep. What's wrong? He asked. Before that, is it really all right for me to open my eyes? So you were awake. How skillful of you to wake up without opening your eyes, Belmont remarked. On Earth, if you wake up and see something, all kinds of tragic, comical things can happen, Vandali explained. There was a phenomenon commonly known as the lucky tsukibi. Incidentally, Vandali had never encountered this kind of phenomenon. I am sure you already saw enough to grow tired of it in the surgery room, said Belmont. And I was someone who was picked up through your compassion. Danasama, leaving that aside, there are a few abnormalities with my status. Abnormalities? Did you gain a status effect? Then we must go back into surgery. With his eyes still closed, Vandali got up from his bed. He had conducted surgery on muscle, fat, organs, bone, nerves and even the brain, so he had expected that there might be some kind of side effect. The chance of such a side effect appearing was much higher for Belmont than Eleonora. That was why he had chosen to sleep close by. No, it is likely a different kind of abnormality from the kind that you are fearing, Danasama, said Belmont. Belmont, I understand that there is no danger to your life right now. But if we don't do anything about the side effects, the risk of it becoming worse is, the race title in my status has changed from noble-born vampire to abyssal vampire. Wow, that was unexpected. Vandali hadn't imagined that the side effect would be a race change. According to Belmont, her rank and attribute values hadn't changed, nor had she gained any new skills, but there was no way that there would be no changes to her after her race had changed. It was best to think that the changes hadn't shown themselves yet. After that, it was confirmed that Eleonora's race had also changed to abyssal vampire. Could it be because you drank too much blood potion? It seemed that it wasn't a bad thing, so for now, Vandali would just need to conduct follow-up examinations. The levels of the surgery, alchemy and guidance, demon path skills have increased. The clattering sound of a wagon's wheels turning came from the night sky. Ha 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 ha. This is a truly exhilarating experience. With his piercing crimson eyes shining, the nightmare carriage Sam was running around in the moonlit night. What are your thoughts, Botchan? He shouted. If I come out onto the coachman's seat, I feel like my face will become distorted from the wind pressure, so I'll pass, replied Vandali, who was relaxing inside the carriage. Sam was currently running through the sky even higher than the clouds with his air-running skill. The atmospheric pressure was different from that of the ground surface, and the cold air was harsher than the middle of winter. The undead Sam and the horses that were a part of him had no problems with this, but Vandali would be attacked mercilessly by these conditions if he were to leave the carriage. They were rather harsh conditions to endure in exchange for a sense of exhilaration. But you really are convenient after all, Sam, Vandali remarked. Jayu, this is so pleasant that I would never imagine that we are flying or rather, running through the air, my lord, said Bone Man. So High Rapisage groaned. Hey, Van, I want to look outside, said Porvina. The inside of the carriage had the same atmospheric pressure as the ground's surface. The airtightness of Sam's carriage should have been non-existent, but his comfort maintenance skill suppressed the effects of not only the atmospheric temperature, but the atmospheric pressure and wind pressure as well. Porvina, let's look outside before we reach the ground, said Vandali. Porvina made a noise of complaint. Rapisage groaned. Yamata, you don't have to sing, said Vandali. Attention please, would anyone like a drink? Asked Rita. Rita, that's attention, not attention, Vandali told her. Tonight, Vandali and his companions were headed towards the former Sauron Duchy, which was now under the occupation of the Amid Empire. Their objective was, of course, to acquire the seeds for Sauron rice, which was apparently similar to Japonica rice. The other objective was to meet the Scylla, another of the races created by Vida, and to gather information. According to Kasim and his friends, who had originally come from the Sauron Duchy, there had been a self-governing dominion of Scylla that originated in the distant past in the Sauron Duchy, though they had never actually seen it. Only certain merchants and noblemen visited it, so they didn't know any details about it, either. It wasn't clear whether death attribute charm demon path enticement would have any effect on the Scylla, but Vandali was Vida's holy son. There was a reasonable chance that they would treat him well if they believed him, that is. And if they were troubled in any way, he would offer a trade, set up a dungeon so that he could go back and forth from the Dominion, establish trade and sign a military treaty for times of emergency. Our territory and fighting strength has expanded, but Talersheim is in a closed-off, remote area of land. Unless we assertively make moves on the outside rather than just staying holed up in the city, we'll be checkmated eventually. Of course, conducting just diplomacy on the outside wasn't enough, but and if I become known as the Demon King and the world treats me as an enemy in the future, I want those who can become powerful allies. Vandali had already acquired 2 fragments of the Demon King and more dangerous sounding skills and titles than he cared to count. If he were to fail in becoming an honorary nobleman in the future, it was possible that he would become a target of extermination to the whole world instead. Thus, Vandali wanted the Sila of the Sauron Duchy to be his allies to begin with. The Amid Empire, which was an enemy to Vandali and his companions no matter how he looked at it, was currently ruling the Sauron Duchy. It was unlikely that any disputes with the Orborn kingdom would arise from damaging the surrounding areas to some extent. Also, he wanted to gain information on Heinz and the remaining 2 pure-breed vampires if possible. Vandali had discovered several of Geberman in Berkhein's hideouts from information that he had extracted from Turnisha, but they had already been vacated. It seemed that they had already taken countermeasures to deal with Vandali. He had to gather information from scratch once more. It would be simple if he could use Heinz to kill their close aides, but, Botjan, we are crossing the mountain range soon, Sam announced. Incidentally, the reason Vandali was traveling through the skies rather than using the labyrinth creation skill to teleport was because he could only teleport the plants, ghosts, insects and those infested by the insects with him, but Sam could carry a large number of people at once. However, the upper skies around the mountain range had become magical skies, known as Devil's Skies, inhabited by high-rank monsters capable of flight, including rank 10 hurricane dragons. However, we have a guest, said Sam. There was a hurricane dragon, releasing lightning and letting out a roar at this strange intruder that was entering its territory. It was a powerful monster that even Sam, who was under the effects of guidance, demon path, would be no match for. Sensei, you're up, said Vandali. Sensei? Belmond repeated. Well, I shall be going. Belmond-san, at times like these, you have to say, door, said Dasa. Door. Poor Venus squealed. The 2 of them were in high spirits for some reason. I see. Door? After complying with their request, Belmond leapt out onto the coachman's seat and then into the sky. Now then, please back her up, said Vandali. There was a roar from the torrent of Notchen's bones, which had been flying behind Sam, as it assaulted the hurricane dragon along with a poisonous breath attack. As its movements slowed down, metal threads wrapped around its wings. Despite being rank 10, a single hurricane dragon could not defeat the coordinated attacks of the rank 10 Belmond and the rank 9 Notchen. Name, Bazdia rank, 7 race, Gulamazinus leader level, 55 job, magical warrior job level, 79 job history, apprentice warrior, apprentice mage, mage age, 31 years old, 27 years old in appearance passive skills, night vision superhuman strength, level 6, level up. Pain resistance, level 3, level up. Paralyzing venom secretion, claws, level 4, level up. Magic resistance, level 3, level up. Intuition, level 3, level up. Active skills, axe technique, level 8, level up. Shield technique, level 6, level up. Archery, level 5, level up. Throwing, level 4, level up. Silent steps, level 3, level up. Coordination, level 5, level up. No attribute magic, level 3, new. Wind attribute magic, level 5, new. Water attribute magic, level 5, new. Mana control, level 3, new. Cooking, level 2, new. Surpass limits, magic axe, level 5, new. Chapter 105, A Person Who Won't Be Escorted. 4 carriages were moving along a highway in the former Sauron Duchy. The carriages at the front and back were packed with mercenaries, and the coachmen of these carriages were mercenaries as well. There were also more mercenaries on horseback surrounding the carriages, further strengthening their defense. And the 2 carriages in the middle were loaded with goods. Really, the world has become a nice place. The leader of this group, Page Bocterin, had a cheerful smile on his face, paying no attention to the strict atmosphere. Rumor has it that this region's name will be formally changed soon. Oh my, what a happy event. With this, the Amid Empire's rule will become firm. The leader of the mercenaries called out to Page. Is it really all right to say that, Dana? Aren't you a pure-blooded citizen of the kingdom? He asked. Was it all right for Page to be so happy when his own nation, his birthplace, had been occupied and was now being ruled by an enemy nation? But Page's smile did not falter despite this question. Of course, he said. Which nation I was born in does not matter. I am a merchant. I love anything that grants opportunities for profit. And the Amid Empire will bring more profits to my business than the Orborn Kingdom. Please look at the commodities behind us. Page pointed at the second and third carriages. Each of them were carrying over a dozen people. This quantity and quality would have been unimaginable in the kingdom. They were slaves. Expensive slave collars hadn't been put around their necks, but there were sturdy shackles around their wrists and ankles instead. Page Boktaran was a slave trader. But slaves were allowed even in the Orborn kingdom. So why was he making more profits under the Amid Empire's occupation? The reason for this was the races of the slaves. The slaves in the carriages were beast people, titans, dark elves, half-elves, and there was even a draconid among them. All of them were members of Veda's races or those who shared their blood. In the Amid Empire, the treatment of slaves of races considered to be people, humans, elves and dwarves, was strictly regulated. However, members of Veda's races and those who shared their blood were discriminated against. Their treatment was essentially unrestricted. Page had noticed this. He was gathering members of Veda's races in the Sauron Duchy and selling them as slaves. It is true that they are attractive women and sturdy slaves that look as if they could work anywhere, the leader of the mercenaries agreed. The carriage contained beautiful women that would even make the mercenary leader himself start drooling, sturdy men who looked as if they would be able to handle all kinds of harsh labor, and young boys who were just at the perfect age to begin teaching them work. The mercenaries were outsiders in this business other than the fighting, but they understood that there were large profits to be made if these slaves were all sold. But didn't the magistrate Sama announce that the emperor would keep the laws regarding slaves in this region as they were now for another 50 years? Said another mercenary. As he pointed out, Emperor Mazukzil had not imposed the empire's discriminatory system in the Sauron Duchy. This was a postponement for the citizens of the Sauron Duchy, and at the same time, it was a trap. If the humans, dwarves and elves of the Sauron Duchy were to suddenly be told that their neighbors, co-workers, lovers, spouses and their own children were to become those who should be discriminated against, they would naturally rebel against the empire. This could potentially cause a large-scale rebellion, and a countless number of people would try to escape into the Orborn kingdom. But if they were to hear that things would stay the same for 50 more years, some of them would feel relief rather than a desire to rebel. For the humans in particular, who were present in the duchy in large numbers, 50 years from now was a distant future, where their children and grandchildren's generation would have already begun. Even dwarves and elves, who had long lifespans, might think that the system would change, or the Orborn kingdom might retake the Sauron Duchy within 50 years. So then, wasn't it best to see how things went for now rather than doing something as dangerous as defying the emperor? These 50 years were a long enough postponement to make the dwarves and elves think this. Doing this was effectively a measure to prevent the people of the Sauron Duchy from unifying. But despite this being intended to be a trap, the law was the law. Breaking it would, of course, lead to severe punishment. That is why I have chosen this road with no people, hired you gentlemen as guards, and am smuggling these slaves into the boundaries of the Amid Empire, is it not? There are no military police who would begin an investigation for the sake of these poor slaves of Veda's races, said Page. The mercenary leader laughed. You're right about that. We'll deliver these goods where they need to be, Dana. So, I know, said Page. I will provide ample remunerations for your work. No, not that. As if pouring water on the black conversation between the slave trader and the mercenary, armed men and women with cloths covering their mouths appeared from the forest on both sides of the carriages, blocking the path ahead and behind. And then a female knight, who had a mask covering her mouth like the others, glared at Page with a sharp glint in her eye and made a declaration. We are the Sauron Liberation Front. Page, you traitor who would even utilize the invaders to sell the people of our nation as slaves. Consider yourself a dead man. Looking closely, some youth could be seen in the knight's face. It was that of a girl who was in her later teenage years. But the strength of her voice contained no signs of inexperience. It's the Sauron Liberation Front, cried one of the mercenaries. Mercenaries, it seems it is already time for you to work. I am counting on you. Page shouted at the leader. His face turned pale, but he didn't lose his composure. The mercenary leader's face twisted in a smile as he raised his special halberd. Yes, leave the execution to me. Page wanted to ask, huh? What are you saying? But what came from his mouth instead was his own blood. He gasped, coughed and then collapsed with his eyes rolled back. As the mercenary leader removed his special weapon from Page's corpse, he bowed towards the female knight. I'm finished, Oju, he said. The other mercenaries tied up the workers that Page had hired and then followed their leader's example, lowering their heads. All right. "Release the slaves from their shackles," the knight ordered. "Yes, leave it to me." The mercenaries that Page had hired were working with the female knight who led the resistance. They removed the shackles from the slaves, who were still confused by the sudden events, and the members of the resistance began wrapping cloaks around the women and children. The female knight called out to the mercenary leader, who seemed somewhat relieved. "Are you all right with this, Debais?" she asked. Though he was indeed scum, mercenaries won't be able to survive if they betray their employers. Debais, the mercenary leader, gave a bitter smile. "Heh, I don't mind," he said. "Mercenaries are just those of us who have no choice but to do this work because we failed to die on the battlefield. Discontinuing this business might be just what we need." And then he gave the salute that he had learned when he was a part of the Sauron Duchy's army before continuing. "We were already losers to begin with. If it means we can return to being soldiers of Sauron before we die, under Oju's flag, no less, we'll cover ourselves in as much mud as we need to." "The flag we wave is not my flag, but the flag of the Sauron family," said the female knight. "I haven't been knighted, I'm merely the eldest daughter in a family of knights." Though she was happy that the former subordinates of her late father were placing their hopes on her, Iris Bareheart didn't fail to remind them of this. There were several other organizations in the resistance apart from the Sauron Liberation Front that she led, and there was also the reborn Sauron Duchy army, led by Duke Sauron's illegitimate child and his younger brother. Though everyone present was an ally, it was best to avoid words and actions that could cause internal discord. "Also, the social status of my family is the lowest among those who are a part of the Liberation Front," said Iris. "I am but a small shrine being lifted up by the others." Iris's family was a family of knights, one of the lowest noble families that could name an heir in the Orborn Kingdom's aristocratic system. And all of the members in the Sauron Liberation Front were from families with higher court ranks than hers. "Iris Oju is saying something again. Is she being sarcastic towards me, the fifth son of a baronet's family? Who knows? Maybe she's being considerate to me, the illegitimate child of an earl's family. No, I am sure that she is holding back for me, a former orphan who became the adopted daughter of a marquis's family to be used for a political marriage." Though all of these members came from such families, they were actually those who would normally never be able to succeed their families or gain significant positions, those who would have eventually become commoners unless they were adopted by another noble family or married to gain another noble surname. In the previous war, many heads of noble families as well as the eldest and second sons who could have succeeded them had fallen in battle or escaped to other duchies. The noblemen remaining in the Sauron region now were those who had either allied themselves with the Empire or dummy replacements left behind bearing their names to reassure people. And those who were not so important to the kingdom that they desperately needed to escape, and yet were individuals that the Empire could not ignore because they did indeed possess the blood of noble families, had gathered under Iris's command. "Hey, you'll just be having me, someone who's been a soldier for 3 generations, joining you, so there won't be any problems," said Debais. "That's reassuring," said Iris. "All right, it's about time we depart." The resistance, whose numbers had doubled now, as well as the slaves who had now become free citizens again, cheered as they began to move with the stolen carriages. The only thing left behind was the pool of the slave traders' blood. The voice of a boy leading a somewhat sinister-looking group of individuals echoed out in the refreshing air of this clear morning. "We'll make this our camping ground," Vandali declared. If survivalists on Earth were to hear this, they might be exasperated, wondering what kind of camping ground this was supposed to be. "Get up." The ground surface was steadily transformed into golems and the slope of the mountain changed into a flat, open space with a reasonable surface area. He didn't forget to transform the bedrock and boulders into stone golems as well, to form pillars that would support the flat ground. And then bones began to join together with clattering noises in this newly formed open ground. Notchen groaned as it transformed into ramparts and inhabitable buildings made of bones. The roofs were made not with tiles, but things such as the bone plates of stegosauruses and tortoise shells. The insides of the buildings were not empty, they contained tables, chairs and beds made of bone. Ritu and Saria quickly carried in the sheets and mattresses that Sam had been carrying aboard and began making the beds. Vandali used his golem transmutation skill to quickly dig a well and his labyrinth construction skill to create a small dungeon for quick travel in emergency situations. Last of all, Ison and the other immortal ints lumbered around Notchen's surroundings, concealing the bone mansion so that it couldn't be seen from outside. "Well done, Danasama," said Belmond. Everything was complete after less than an hour. Everyone began to rest, drinking the tea that Belmont had prepared. With just that much time and effort, a base that was very comfortable to live in with the defenses of a sturdy fort had been created. It even had food and water available from the well and the immortal ints, and there was an emergency escape option as well. I'm sure it would be designated as a disaster, Vandali remarked quietly, looking at Notchen, or rather, one of its skeletons, who was the core of this base. Notchen gave a curious groan. A fortress filled with countless undead had suddenly appeared in an unnoticed location. Any previously prepared precautions and defenses were useless in such a situation. And because Notchen possessed the high-speed flight skill, its mobility was incomparably superior to those of other bone forts. If it wanted to, it could go over castle walls at night and form a fortress before morning while attacking the city. It was an absolute nightmare from a defender's point of view. Now that it comes to this, I'll have to consider that the Empire, Kingdom and the pure-breed vampires might use similar tactics and rework Talersheim's defensive tactics, said Vandali. Van, don't be scared. Calm down, said Porvina. Relax, Vandali. There's no need to be scared, said Darsa. The two of them were trying to calm him down now that he was feeling an irrational sense of danger and imagining things that were impossible. Please look over here, my lord. I am managing to do this with more than usual, said Bone Man, who had removed his own skull and ribs and started juggling them, perhaps in an attempt to draw Vandali's attention away from such thoughts. Botchan, the chances of the Empire or the Kingdom throwing a monster like a bone fort onto the front lines are well, nil, said Saria. There wasn't even a 1% chance. As long as Vandali was the only one capable of taming undead, there was nobody who could manipulate monsters of the same type as a bone fort. If they were to use large plant-type monsters or special golems, it might theoretically be possible to achieve something similar, but these would just be empty theories. Even if such empty theories somehow became reality, such large plant-type monsters would likely move slower than shellfish on land, and the manufacturing cost of a moving fortress-type golem with current alchemical knowledge would cause nations to go bankrupt 10 times over. Then what about the pure-breed vampires? Princess Livia asked. I do not know how much fighting strength Berkine and Gubberman possess, but I do not believe that they possess a bone fort, said Belmont. Is that true? Princess Livia seemed surprised. But I do think that Notchen-san is very convenient. Bone forts were rare undead monsters and only a handful of them had been historically confirmed to exist, but Berkine and Gubberman had been alive since the Age of the Gods. As they were capable of taming undead, it wouldn't have been strange for them to set their sights on bone forts. That was what Princess Livia had thought, but Belmont shook her head. Princess, you mustn't use Dan-Asama as a standard, she said. They are capable of taming undead, but they are only capable of controlling undead that they have created themselves using corpses as materials. They are unable to tame undead that already move and exist. Thus, if they wished to possess a bone fort, they would need to create one, but gathering such a number of bones would be truly difficult, in every sense of the word. And after they gathered the materials, they would need to perform a ritual to turn them into an undead, so this would take a considerable amount of time. Can they not steadily develop from rank 1 living bones? Vandali asked. I do not believe that they did this, said Belmont. If they wanted more fighting forces, increasing the numbers of subordinate vampires would suffice, and Dan-Asama, the majority of undead are not as intelligent as Notchen Dono and Bone Man Dono. In other words, even after taking the effort to raise them, they would be left with undead who would only be able to obey simple commands like, fight, and, stay here. And they are not managing a nation or a large-scale mercenary band to begin with, Belmont continued. They are a type of criminal organization. They do not even have any need to directly fight an enemy army. The pure-breed vampires who worshipped evil gods had survived up until now by spreading their roots beneath society. Thus, it was apparently unnecessary for them to conduct large-scale battles such as wars on their own. To begin with, pure-breed vampires and high-ranking noble-born vampires each possessed enough fighting strength to scatter the army of a single nation. As they had no civilians that they needed to protect, just one or perhaps a few of them would need to go on a rampage or simply escape. Then what about the evil gods? Vandali asked. The evil gods, you ask? My knowledge does not extend that far, Belmont said, unable to answer his question. However, Vandali and his companions would one day do battle with the evil gods, including Hihireushukaka, the evil god of joyful life, the one who had given Gubberman and the other two pure-breed vampires his divine protection. As long as this fact remained true, they needed countermeasures against these enemies. Well, even if I want to come up with countermeasures, I can't come up with anything other than defeating them through sheer force, so let's prepare while trying to think of new ideas, said Vandali. My apologies. I have failed to convince him, said Belmont. That's not true, Belmont-san, said Dasa. You did well. Jayu, there is nothing to apologize for, said Bone Man. My lord has returned to normal, after all. Notchen groaned in agreement. As Vandali watched everyone thank Belmont for her efforts, he wondered whether he was overthinking things, but he reconsidered and decided that it would be best to make preparations while not doing anything unreasonable. It was thanks to Vandali's persecutory delusions that Taylorsheim's defenses had been increased to this extent. Now then, we'll be going now. Everyone, if bandits or Empire soldiers come and you can stop them from passing, please dispose of them. The same goes for the vampires who work for the evil gods. But you mustn't lay a hand on the people of the resistance. If they look like they will die, please help them. With these words, Vandali left his camp along with his companions. The first objective was to make contact with the Scylla, but first he had to gather nearby spirits to gain information. That was why they were going for a little walk around the area first. Well, I don't have high hopes for this, Vandali said. In these nature-filled mountains and hills, there were countless forms of life and the air was restless with countless spirits appearing and disappearing. These spirits were very convenient for making golems. However, it was difficult to say that they were useful as a source of information. The spirits of plants were insensitive to their surroundings, and Vandali didn't expect much from the spirits of insects, either. Animals would know a few things about the areas that their territories encompassed. Birds were the most promising, as they had good eyes and lived over wide areas. But the spirits of such wild animals lost memories from when they were alive very quickly, and the vast majority of them lasted less than a year before returning to the circle of transmigration. Thus, the only reliable ones were the spirits of intelligent creatures such as people or monsters. But this was simply a nature-filled mountain in the middle of nowhere. There weren't even any signs of battle having taken place here, so it was unlikely that there would be spirits of people here. Therefore, the spirits of monsters should have been the ones to look for, but I wonder if there are any goblins or something, said Vandali. Despite the fact that we are trying to find them, there aren't any, are there? Said Princess Livia. There really aren't any, said Porvina. The three of them were going along a mountain path, searching for monsters that could be used as sources of information, but this seemed to be a more peaceful mountain than they had thought. There wasn't a single trace of a goblin, despite the fact that goblins were monsters that could be found anywhere. Though it was entirely possible that they had simply fled in fear of the Titan ghost who was over 2 meters tall and the enormous little girl. This would be a relative success if we were just watching the autumn leaves fall, though, said Vandali. The trees here were separated by generous amounts of space, and the sunlight filtering through the leaves was very beautiful. There were no red leaves and few autumn colors, but it was not a bad view at all. What are we hunting? More Mage's monsters? Porvina asked. Porvina had made a common misunderstanding for children first hearing about watching autumn leaves fall, so Vandali went to correct her. But Princess Livia responded first. They are deer-type monsters, she said. It was written on stone tablets that deer-meters called Mage. This is correct, isn't it? Yes, they're deer, said Vandali. It was another world, so there wouldn't really be any problems if watching autumn leaves falling had a different meaning. Suddenly, Porvina began sniffing the air. I can smell water this way, she said. Began sniffing the air. I can smell water this way, she said. Displaying the sharp sense of smell of a half-noble orc, Porvina did more work than the swarms of spirits gathering around. Going to the water should give some clues, shouldn't it? Said Princess Livia. Like lizardmen, Scylla were a race that needed to be near water. Of course, that didn't mean that all bodies of water would have Scylla living there, but they would at least get some clues. I shall remain hidden nearby, then, said Princess Livia. Please do, said Vandali. Porvina, where is the smell coming from? It's over there. Just in case, Livia raised her presence. Vandali followed Porvina, who was following the smell of water. After a short while, they arrived at a small pond. There aren't any Scylla sands, are there? Said Porvina, sounding disappointed. As she said, there were no signs of Scylla at this small marsh that was about 10 meters across. But there is someone who used to be a Scylla, said Vandali. He could see the spirit of a Scylla. It's not here, it's not here, it's not here, the Scylla whispered. Her expression was terribly depressed, and she appeared to be searching for something with both of her hands and the tentacles of her lower body. She was apparently searching so frantically that she hadn't taken notice of Vandali's demon path enticement skill. She was what is known as a Jibakuroi. It was the most ghost-like spirit that Vandali had ever encountered. "What are you looking for?" he asked. As Vandali spoke to her, the Silas spirit raised her face and was taken aback. And then her expression loosened as she gazed at him. The shadow of sadness that had been present in her expression had dramatically receded. "An important ring. I was only just given it, and I went and lost it." Deciding it was fine to show her to poor Vina, Vandali cast visualization on the Silas spirit as it began talking. She told him that she was a Sila by the name of Orbia, from a clan that ran a village near this pond. Sila were an entirely female race, and Orbia had a secret relationship with a certain man. This man was a person who held a significant position in society, and their relationship could not be made known. But he told me that he wanted to give me a symbol of our engagement and asked me to come out here alone, so I snuck out of the village. And then, right here, I received the ring from that person. I was so happy that I began to feel faint, and before I knew it, you had died," said Vandali, finishing her sentence. "That's right. Before I knew it, I'd turned into a ghost. That person was nowhere to be found and the ring was gone and I didn't know what was going on." "You poor thing, you forgot what happened when you died, didn't you?" said poor Vina. "It was painful when you realized that you died before realizing it, wasn't it?" said Princess Livia. The three of them had experienced death before. They nodded in sympathy as they listened to Orbia's story. "Well then, I'll help you look for the ring," said Vandali. "Are you sure? I've searched for days and haven't found it, you know," said Orbi. "Yes. I have to divide first." "Divide? You're dividing?" Vandali used out-of-body experience to multiply himself and searched everywhere, even inside the mud of the marsh. While he was doing this, Princess Livia and Porvina were asking Orbia how she had died. "Do you have any idea as to when you died?" Princess Livia. There was the option of using mental encroachment, but there was a possibility of Orbia going mad and her mind crumbling if her memories were dug up forcefully, so it was best to ask her and have her remember. "No, I don't remember anything." The appearance of ghosts were often influenced by how they appeared when they died. The spirit of a person who had been stabbed in the chest would have a knife protruding from their chest, so it would be easily to tell the cause of death in such a case, but Orbia had no external injuries. It was possible that the cause of death hadn't appeared on her spirit body because she didn't remember how she had died. "I'm sure it happened in an instant," said Porvina. "You don't remember what happened before you died? Maybe something strange happened. Now that you mention it, recently, in a number of villages, there have been incidents where Sila have been getting attacked in places where they were alone and killed in horrible ways. Could it be that I was killed by the person responsible for that? This is terrible. What if that man was also put in danger?" Orbia exclaimed. It's all right," said Porvina, reassuring her. "If that person's spirit was nearby, Van would have noticed." "That's right," said Princess Livia. "I'm sure that your precious person is safe." "You're right," said Orbia, regaining her composure. "That wouldn't necessarily have happened to that person." Just as she finished speaking, all of Vandali's clones returned to his physical body. "Unfortunately, I couldn't find your ring," said Vandali. "It was either stolen by the one who killed you or it's with your dead body. Or perhaps that person has it?" "I see. Thanks for searching for it," said Orbia. "With this, I can give up." Suddenly, Orbia grew fainter. Now that she knew that her ring wasn't here, her lingering attachment had faded and she was trying to return to the circle of transmigration. Orbia and Ain Porvina whispered. "Please find happiness after you are reborn, all right?" said Princess Livia. The two of them watched her with sad expressions. "Yes, thank you," Orbia said to them with a smile as she disappeared. Excuse me, but it would be really helpful if you could lead me to the Sila village. Come to think of it, I didn't tell you where it is, did I?" Orbia came back before disappearing. "Also, do you have no intention of becoming an undead?" asked Vandali. "You'll be able to take revenge on the criminal with your own hands." "An undead? Not really," Orbia said. "I suppose I don't really care about revenge, and as long as that person is safe, but while I'm at it, I might want to confirm his safety for myself." And so she easily agreed to stay with Vandali. It seemed that she wanted to at least stay with him until she could make sure that her lover was safe. "I'm happy, but conflicted," said Porvina. "I kind of knew that things would come to this, though." "It is conflicting indeed," Princess Livia agreed. though I did think that things would come to this. The two of them, who had both been stopped from returning to the circle of transmigration by Vandali, glared at him with reproachful eyes. Having undead insects deliver a message to everyone else who was waiting, Vandali and his companions headed for the village that Orbia used to live in, following her lead. The village was apparently in the marshes in the mountains. This child is Veda's holy son? Amazing. Us Sila have been worshipping Veda all this time, but none of us have this title. Orbia exclaimed. Foo fun. That's right, said Porvina. Van is amazing. And what about that person that you love, Orbia Anijan? I can't tell you his name, said Orbia. But he's really cool, especially when he flicks his bangs to the side, like this. Her lover was apparently a handsome person with characteristic bangs. At this rate, it seems that we'll be able to identify her lover straight away, Vandali whispered. But as they were drawing closer to a river that lay between them at the village, they heard a piercing scream. It could be that someone is being attacked, Vandali said. You were so fast. But why are you using your hands to run as well? Because it's faster. Porvina and Princess Livia, please follow me. Without waiting for a response, Vandali immediately began running on all fours towards the direction that the scream had come from. That's probably not right, but it might be. Your tongue extended. Orbia seemed bewildered, but Vandali used the unarmed fighting technique martial skill, tongue blade, to cut through the branches that were in the way. He kept running, deciding that he'd think about things after finding the one who had let out the scream. If they were being attacked by Orbi's murderer, he would have to make heavy use of magic, so he wasn't using flight. In fact, since he was traveling just to the nearby river, flying wouldn't have been much faster than running on all fours. Name, Saria rank, 7 race, living made armor level, 49 passive skills, special 5 senses strengthened physical ability, level 6, level up. Water element resistance, level 7, level up. Physical attack resistance, level 6, level up. Self-enhancement, subordinate, level 4, new. Active skills, housework, level 4, level up. Halberd technique, level 7, level up. Coordination, level 4, level up. Archery, level 5, level up. Spirit form, level 7, level up. Long distance control, level 7, level up. Armor technique, level 6, level up. Name, Rita rank, 7 race, living made armor level, 51 passive skills, special 5 senses strengthened physical ability, level 7, level up. Fire element resistance, level 7, level up. Physical attack resistance, level 6, level up. Self-enhancement, subordinate, level 4, new. Active skills, housework, level 3, level up. Naginata technique, level 7, level up. Coordination, level 5, level up. Archery, level 5, level up. Throwing, level 7, new. Spirit form, level 7, level up. Long distance control, level 7, new. Armor technique, level 7, new. Monster explanation, living made armor. Saria and Rita have become these monsters after Vandali added dark copper armor to them in the shape of frills and laces. It can be assumed that the likely conditions for becoming living made armors are things such as possessing the housework skill, being someone's maid, and being suits of armor that appear maid-like. As there are no rank 6 living armor type undead with the housework skill that are aware that they are maids other than Saria and Rita, they are the first monsters of their kind to appear in Lambda. Thus, there is a high chance that adventurers seeing them would mistake them for strangely shaped living armors or living magic armors. It is not only combat abilities that receive bonuses, the housework skill receives bonuses as well, so they have a potential to develop into exceptional maids. Chapter 106, regarding the difficulty of communication between
Okay, sorry. Okay, guys. So far we are doing a really lot of progress here with the sketch. Right now I'm just putting some details on the background, and as you can see, I'm doing this gate over here. Right there, right. Yeah, this will be interesting once it's done. Should probably Uh, yeah, I need to add another one over here somewhere later. Next time. I need to remember that, so let's just put that over there and that. Uh, yeah. So, a tiny wall with a fence, with a tombstone, a bit of a water puddle over here, a shadow, and some leaves that I would definitely shape next time, including this one over here. But the rest, it's still need to ship the tree over here. But other than that, the rest of the trees looks solid. It's per kampakine. Yeah. And yeah, just a little bit of bushes over here and a bit of details. Maybe that would help the environment of the background would work really interesting. hmm And I note I've also uh, informed earlier, or yeah, even informed. Yeah, I informed at the beginning of this sketch that I would like to give her a bit of a wet kind of a feel. So I'm gonna put some water drops, and let's see if I can find some pictures that would help uh, with this in the near future, or some tutorials. Because yeah, it's a bit. I want to put some rain on this just to experiment, or uh, add some new skills to my skill tree. Yeah, so I'll be putting some water drops around. She won't be too wet, I think. Just a bit of uh, water drops over here and there. Let's just see. hmm The shadow is a bit of confusing due to he might be like a connection to the water bottle over here. But other than that, yeah. Why I choose this kind of lighting also is like she's being there's like a flashlight trying to look for shine at her, but it's not directly shining at her, just around the at the ground level, so the light is bouncing towards her, so producing this cold lighting, while there's this purple lighting at the background as for the secondary lighting that I'm planning over here. As you can see, still going to add some few more purple lighting over here, and adjust some of the values that would really help this pop out. hmm So like the samples I showed earlier, like yeah, that the wolf guy over there earlier, and this one, something like this. I'm planning to apply on this the blue and the green, except for this one, they're using both cool colors. But I'm gonna replace the green color into some purplish, yeah, purplish red, making it warmer instead of another cool color. Mm, yeah, like how it turns out. The background. hmm Really interested to finish this up. Uh, but yes, this is just primary details. Still gonna add some few more details when I finish this up, especially when I start coloring the background. As for the character, I think she's yeah, I think the raindrops are the only things that are remaining. A bit kind of disappointed with how I did the uh, color mixing on the clothes over here. I don't know what I should do. Maybe some few maybe we should try a different method. I'll try next time. They're all inside. The editing on this one, or the blending on this one, is mostly in just one layer over here. Yeah, I'll try probably next time if I can do something different. But I'll keep this up. Uh, I'll keep this because yeah, don't want to get rid of it right now. Because I really want to try something like this. I tried to follow the patterns of how this was painted, but I kind of lost myself just me just like following the pattern I already put on the design there. Mm, yeah, I already put some details due to my excessive desire of putting uh, texture already. Uh, that's why it's kind of hard to like adjust it now that I have applied some of the lighting and color blending. But let's just see what what I can cook up if I decide to change it next time. It'll take a lot more time again, but guess that won't be uh, a bit of an issue if I just do it properly next time. mm, so yeah, I wonder if I, well, it does work if I try to maybe a multiply layer, because I really want to like make it a bit prominent also that her clothes are wet. That's why she's like raising her dress. She's just trying to get rid of the water on her dress or something. Yeah, this would be dripping water around. Yeah, I can't wait. Oh well. So yeah, that's pretty much some of the issues of my work ethic due to my excitement of just putting details or putting some new elements on my canvas. Sometimes I end up making a lot of mistakes and just didn't plan it well at the very beginning also. Mizu. Oh well, other than this, yeah, let's see what we can do next week with this. I'll be trying to play tomorrow if I can with Monster Hunter Rise, and yeah, I'll continue this next week. Hopefully, I have a lot of time to do so. Uh, all right, let's proceed with the story for now. For the Deathmatch doesn't want to, who doesn't want a fourth time? There we go. All right. So far so good. The story is progressing really well. Now that Vandali is actually there's two more reincarnators who just died. Uh, actually, there was one of them who actually knows Vandali during his high school life, but they didn't really interact well with him due to the lifestyle of Vandali. That was due to his adoptive parents, his uncle and his aunt, and their stupid son. And it's a I'm kind of glad to hear their what happened to them at the end. That they end up having pretty much bad luck afterwards due to them being just a very bad people, and their thoughts of like torturing people or like bullying people. That's just really bad. I hate those kind of type of people so much. Like they try to express their frustrations and to relieve their frustrations through violence and stuff. And that's like the source of bullying in this world. And I really hate that kind of character. So yeah, his uncle and his family are like pretty much douchebags, and hopefully they at least try to repent for what they've done to Vandally, because that was just unjustified what they did. And now that they've actually are now very poor, having some issues in their life, the mother got in prison, the child uh, hasn't accomplished anything, and living on a really low salary, and the father the uncle became homeless. So that's a plus to their suffering. uh, but they are the reincarnated ones that are now, and uh, what's why can't I remember his name immediately? Let's me check his uh, Rod Courtney. Yeah, here there we go. Rod Courtney has now familiars, the two reincarnated ones, who are not combat related types, or more on information gathering and stuff. So now they're his familiar, but they're not very impressed with Rod Courtney, and I think the two of them will probably be in Vendely's side in the near future. Just predicting what will happen due to their attitudes towards the Rod Courtney, and their outlook to Vandally and his decisions. They could really see what he did was kind of justifiable in their eyesight, but they also don't want to be his enemy, and I think there will be a good chance that they might work together in the near future. Okay. All right. So yeah, Red Courtney is in a panic also due to the situation. This won't really happen if he just sympathizes with people, as it was his issue. Not really sympathizing with uh, the people he tries to reincarnate, and this led to creating Vandally. Uh, right, I guess. Um, and also now they are in. I'm not really sure what territory they are right now, but they're in the Sila territory. If I yeah, from the latest chapter that we did, but I can't remember the place that they are right now. Yeah, they're just in this new municipality where they're having um, some civil war issues, and the Sila is actually being dragged into the problem. As we have read through the story, there's actually a murder in Sila, and Vandally managed to meet up with the ghost of this murdered Sila. Sadly, she can't remember how she died and can't relate what just happened, but she eventually got betrayed by her lover. So get let's just wait for the what will happen when they see each other. Also, it wasn't really justified for the guy, whatever his reason, just to kill some innocent people, even though they're monsters and different races. It was just really awful for him just to trick that sailor woman into being his lover, and still ended up just being used and then killed at the end of it. That was really messed up. All right, I guess that's the gist of what happened of the story, the highlights of these things that uh, I think I've listened well to. All right, so right now that's pretty much how the end of all the stuff we have done today and listened to. I'm still very satisfied with what I've done here. I'll definitely improve more, add more vibrancy on this because it looks just so monochromatic for the background. Need some few more colors. Yeah, a few more beautiful colors to add in here. hmm Okay, so yeah, thank you again if you've listened to check this out in an archive. Just look at all my stuff that I did with my art with adventure. I have a lot of beautiful artworks that I've done in my opinion. I don't know if you would consider my work really beautiful or something, but for me, it's really nice already. Still need to improve, but yeah, I'm satisfied with some things I've did, and hopefully you will also. If you've enjoyed all these things, please leave a like and subscribe to my channel. It would be really great, and I would really appreciate it. And thanks again for listening to my commentary and stuff that I discussed to you. Okay, so I'll see you again uh, tomorrow because I'm gonna play definitely, and next week we're gonna continue this wonderful, wonderful piece of an art. Okay, okay, guys, thank you very much again, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.